Hey guys, can you hear me okay? Yeah, it's me. I wore a little different outfit than I might usually do because, you guys made me put this hat on. I wasn't really too happy about the hat, but I'm trying it out for size. I feel a little nervous coming out like this and just, sharing myself with the group. I mean, this is sort of a confession, so I have a lot of things to say that are on my mind. I know you guys have been questioning me about things like my eating habits and, what am I actually doing here on Earth, and I just want you to try to relax a little bit. I don't really think it's fair to be criticizing me about my lifestyle choices or the things that I, may or may not want to do with my life. So why don't you guys just back off and leave me some space, okay? I don't really want to wear this hat anyway. I think I look better like this. I mean, it's kind of a little more masculine. And I'm trying my hardest to just be good here for you guys and give you some warmth and some sharing and some love from the interdimensional planes. We're not trying to hurt anybody. All right, woo! Mate, it's your dear uncle. It's Colin. Colin McGeezer. You got to go through this too, mate. I said before I wanted something like this, and now I've got it, mate. It says no. You can't guess what's inside by shaking me, mate. That's not going to work out. Why? Because I'm, where is it here? Wait, a tick. Ah, yes. I'm made with less material. You see that, mate? It's subtext. It's innuendo. There's other conditions that are at work in terms of the message of made with less material. You see, our companies are not doing what we like them to be doing right now. So we're a little bit on the shy side. That's why if you ask us who it's to, we might say it's fragile. This actually did happen. Oh, mate, you're not supposed to see that. That's me address label, mate. Anyway, it's Colin here. How is everybody? Let's... Come on, mate. We got to do something to make it a little bit more interesting. We want your beautiful face. Well, I got to wear these glasses at times, mate. It's not always easy being me, but we got to see what you guys have got to say. Everybody seems to be laughing. Laughter is the best medicine, mate. That's what we're trying to do here. So we do have our dot connecting global peace meditation, mate, and I'm happy to be bringing that to you today. But first, I wanted to talk about my cake boxes. Now, I got to tell you something. I'm going to be talking out of skill a little bit here, mate, because, we had this Australian Secret Service, or ASS, and we found out later you Yanks have got another name for that. We call it the bum or something like that. But was trained for the ASS, and I'm out on my normal routine, no big deal, thinking everything's fine, and I get paid. I get paid for laying some ease into the world, for causing rest, and so I get paid in the form of a cake box, mate. I'm not even joking with you. They paid me in cake boxes. And the cake boxes were full of Australian $100 bills. Now, mate, in the beginning, I did a few jobs. I had a few cake boxes. I kept them around the house. No big deal. Sheila doesn't care. My sons don't care. But after a while, mate, as I got more, let's say, proficient at what I was doing, the cake boxes started to pile up. Pretty soon, there's so many cake boxes in the closet, in the attic, in the garage, in the basement, that my wife, she goes, Colin, why you got so many cake boxes in here? We can't spend any of this money. It's just lying around, mate. So at that point, mate, I got a little bit wise to that. I said, all right, then. I'll bury the cake boxes out in the yard. Nobody's ever going to see them again. Mate, I still haven't found all of them. Some of them got all damaged. I don't know, but that's what it's like when you're in the biz, mate. Just a little bit of talking out of skill for you. Okay. You guys like that zany stuff? Of course you do. You guys like to have fun, so do I. Anyway, the real point of why we're here today is actually that you are about to undergo a massive shift in consciousness. I'm happy to be here. This is the real David Wilcock now, not the comedy characters, but you know, we have to get started somehow. He's trying to tell me to sell ads, like I'm not really that worried about selling ads. Well, I'm actually live. But anyway, we are in a very interesting situation here. I've been fighting this sty on my eye. Finally, it's good enough that I can go on camera and not completely hate myself, which I think is a good place to start. But yeah, that happens from time to time. You just got to pick it up a bit and don't worry about it, mate. If it happens, just let it go. You don't have to be so concerned about everything all the time, bloke. Just get it right, mate. So anyway, it's been fun up here. I've finally, in the last couple of days, I'm starting to have fun. Why? Because the winter season is finally over. We don't have wind. We're not in this crazy hurricane type of situation where we get gusts going up to 70 miles an hour. I mean, it really is pretty amazing to live out here and be going through all this. And what's been happening to me is quite phenomenal. I spent 2 years more or less off camera, but during this time, I've been having some very, very intense experiences with Archangel Michael, which I had no idea that this is anything other than just some Catholic term for something that was seen in the Bible, but I didn't really know what that was. I hadn't really read about it, anything like this. But at the same time, going back to here, back in 1996, I began using the techniques of remote viewing in order to obtain information in the form of spoken verbal transcripts. And there was a long, rich legacy of this going back to sources such as Edgar Cayce. My mother was very into a source called Jane Roberts that she claimed to have channeled an entity called Seth. And the main Seth book that my mother was really interested in was A Nature of Personal Reality. And that work was fascinating because the basic principle is you create your own reality. So I grew up as a kid having my mother being really into this and taking it kind of for granted that, yeah, there's these extra-dimensional beings and they can talk to us. And these are good things. You know, we want to have this knowledge because they really have some pretty incredible stuff to share with us. So as time went on, I started to hear about remote viewing on the Art Bell show, beginning in 1996. That's when I began listening, and actually 95. And so remote viewing was a military procedure in which people go through a stringent set of protocols to create a mind-awake, body-asleep state. That means your body feels like it's asleep, but your mind is fully conscious. And you are going out there then with your astral body. You're doing astral projection, and you're viewing a remote target, hence remote viewing. Now, what's interesting about remote viewing is that people were getting 99% accurate results even if the person who was guiding them during the session didn't know what they were supposed to be looking at. All they would get, both parties would get, the guide and the remote viewer, was a couple pieces of paper that had numerical coordinates on them. It started out as latitude and longitude, and then over time they just became random numbers. But even if neither person had the numbers, the remote viewer would still find out what the target was correctly when this process was being properly used. And this is very, very amazing. Oh, did you like my new lights, by the way? This is kind of like a Turkish thing. It seems to be emblematic of a UFO contact. I felt like it just nudged in right there perfectly. It's good if I hydrate, so let's keep that going. So anyway, remote viewing was a very practical technique that had been widely perfected, and then in the 95-96 era, we had various guests on Art Bell who were coming forward and sharing the protocols, and one of them, Dr. Courtney Brown, wrote books about it. And the first one was called Cosmic Voyage, and I read the appendix at the back that talks about how to do this, and I followed the principles. And at the same time, I also was talking to someone online, Joe Mason, who had a technique called the dream voice. And he said, if you can fall asleep in the morning and then you wake up and you still can remember your dreams, then at that point, you are now getting this thing called, what he called the dream voice. And the whole idea behind that is that you want to have no awareness of what you're saying. You just kind of let the words speak. You listen in a 360-degree pattern around yourself. It's like there's a halo around your body of sound, and you could hear it in any of a number of directions. And it's just little fleeting things that seem to come and go, and they don't matter. And I'd already noticed for years that I would have this as I was falling asleep or waking up. It's a fairly common thing. They call it the hypnopompic state or the hypnagogic state, depending on whether you're doing it as you're falling asleep or waking up. Hypnagogic is when you're falling asleep. So once I started to realize that there could be some data involved in this by talking to this guy, Joe Mason, it was November 10th, 1996, that I began listening to what it was saying and putting it down on a tape recorder. And it turns out that this was a wonderful practice because immediately it began predicting the future with stunning accuracy, speaking in very cryptic ways. There was a lot of code, there was a lot of symbolism. And I ended up doing this practice again, starting in 1996, and it continued until 2000. I mean, it went on after that because I had clients who I was doing psychic readings for, but it didn't actually get to be the end of the books that I had to write now in the 2020s. That didn't finish until 2000. So as it says here, it's now turned into 7 prophetic books, and it's been something that took a great deal of my time, I got to say. This was not easy. It's been quite a life sacrifice for me to do this. I'm just making sure I'm online, but it looks like everybody can hear me and everything is good. You know, you never know with live, so it's just always good to check all these things. Anyway, the Michael contact, it didn't even identify itself as Archangel Michael until probably the mid to late 1999 era. So I had 96, 97, and 98 that were huge because I was getting thousands of pages. And it was very interesting because it predicted the death of Princess Diana. It predicted the heart attack of Mother Teresa. It predicted the Heaven's Gate mass suicide. It called it Marvin Gate. And so at the time that these things were happening, there was lots of 9/11 prophecies that then came true in 2001. So on the day of 9/11, on the actual day when most people are freaking out, I got the first of a series of prophetic articles published on my website talking about dreams I'd already had that pinpointed that 9/11 was actually going to be taking place. I mean, with very, very stunning accuracy, over and over again. So this was very interesting because it took, you know, years of my life. I was doing these readings, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week, writing my dreams down every day. But I was doing these readings that I called global readings because, first of all, the reading term comes from Edgar Cayce. A psychic reading means he was under hypnosis and he was speaking on behalf of some higher consciousness, which did occasionally identify itself as Archangel Michael, interestingly enough. So Archangel Michael, when Archangel Michael showed up in the Edgar Cayce readings, there are eyewitness reports. Let me make sure my shirt is nice and straight as I say this. There's eyewitness reports of his body levitating off the ground and having this enormous booming voice, sort of like you cranked up the bass subwoofer on your stereo way too much. And it was so intense that the walls were shaking, the windows were shaking, the windows were opening and closing sometimes. You could hear forks and spoons and knives rattling in the silverware drawer, as well as plates and dishes inside the kitchen. Objects occasionally flew through the air. Sometimes doors opened and closed, slammed, sometimes windows opened and closed. And the feeling of this sound going through your body and all these things happening was so intense. It was very common for people to be crying. It was very common for people to go into a state of ecstasy and kind of spastic ecstasy because you just don't expect anything like this is ever going to happen to you. And then when it does, it's just so phenomenal. So again, his secretary, Gladys Davis Turner, said that she noticed that his body was levitating. Isn't that interesting? She noticed the body was levitating. So this is a very fascinating story, the Archangel Michael contact through Edgar Cayce, that this is when really strange and scary but wonderful things were happening that we would normally associate with miracles. So it was when I was doing these readings, and basically by mid-1999, the source identified itself as Archangel Michael. And that's the same source that Edgar Cayce had levitating his body. Now, I'd also, by this point, it was actually by October 1997, found out that I had a stunning facial resemblance to Edgar Cayce. It's the best that any reincarnation researchers who look at these things have ever seen. Now, Dr. Ian Stevenson, in the 1960s is when he began. Dr. Ian Stevenson found over 3,000 children in the Middle East, mostly in the Middle East, who could remember or claim that they could remember their past lives. Once they remembered details, he went and validated those details, and in some cases, there was one girl who remembered the names of like 22 or 23 different people, remembered exactly what furniture was in the house, what paintings were on the wall, what the house looked like. So some of these kids really got a great deal of information coming through that was way beyond anything they could have had, except for maybe they remembered this other lifetime as if it was part of their existence. Well, that seemed to be what it was. It was a straight ahead past life memory. And what was so fascinating about this was that it went on for, many, many years. And over time, he began to realize that when kids remembered being someone else, if you looked at pictures of that someone else and then you looked at pictures of the kid, especially as they grew into adulthood, they looked very, very similar. Their faces were almost identical. And this wasn't just one or two things. This was the rule, not the exception. It happened over and over again as he would do these forensic follow-ups on the actual information that he's looking for. So this was really incredible. The idea that these children had somehow remembered being this other person, and then they look like that person, and they remember the experiences of being that person. This is very holographic, and it really does get back into multidimensionality. And the idea, when you get into Edgar Cayce's work, and then you get into later works, my personal favorite being The Law of One, which came through from 1981 to 1983, for the most part. It was one in 1984, I think. The Law of One and sources like the Cayce readings say that we have, or in the Seth books with Jane Roberts, I mentioned that, they say we have a multidimensional personality. There is a part of us that exists in some sort of higher reality, and in that higher reality, we do not exist as flesh and blood. We exist as some form of energy. And then that energy is not bound by linear time. The linear time factor that we see is a function of projecting into flesh, projecting into materiality. And it's very, very interesting. Okay. So the idea then is that we have simultaneous lives. This is one of the things the Seth books say, like in the Seth material. That's the one I really studied in, 1997, very strongly. He says we have simultaneous lifetimes, simultaneous places where our soul projects into that we call physical lives. And they look like each other because apparently, even though some of our facial features are derived from heredity, there's another aspect of facial features that has to do with who you really look like as a soul, that there's a soul face that you have. There's a face of your soul. And each lifetime that you have illustrates that face. So even if you were to come back in a future lifetime, you're going to have basically the same face. Now, the first time I encountered this was when I had an out-of-body / near-death experience. I had my friend do a dangerous hyperventilation technique on me when I was in high school, and my body slumped down, and I had a vivid flashback of another lifetime. And at the end of that lifetime, I was looking into a lotus and trying to look into my eyes and my face, and I saw my face, but I had African features. But it was my eyes and enough around this part of my face, absolutely it's me. So that happened to me just in high school, and I didn't know what it was, but it was very interesting that I saw myself as a black man, but that I had, very similar eyes, and a lot of the bone structure, my face was similar, so it was very interesting. And then only years and years later did I find out that there was research about this by Dr. Ian Stevenson. So again, Dr. Stevenson's research is truly phenomenal because it's showing us that we have a reiterating spirit. And we get born into a body, we're born as a baby, we grow up into adulthood, eventually our bodies die. But the Casey reading said that there was a class for being on Earth. You're not just reincarnating over and over again for no reason, you're reincarnating because you need to learn something. And what you're actually learning, apparently, is first and foremost what the Law of One calls the first distortion of the Law of One. And that's a very confusing term, they use it all the time, but it means free will, and it also means the law of karma. So the universe has a built-in cosmic system to reveal to you the fruits of how you treat other people. And this is the core spiritual teaching of ageless wisdom that we find very heavily in Christianity, very heavily in Hinduism. They have the principle of ahimsa, where you hurt no living thing. Very heavily in Buddhism, which was influenced by Hinduism. Buddhism has monastic, ascetic processes, very strict stuff about being a hermit and renouncing physical possessions, renouncing all of the things that you would normally take for granted in a human lifetime. And it's only once all of that signal is stripped away from the world that then you get this new voice, which is the voice of silence, the voice of stillness. And in that voice of stillness, something is speaking that is not part of your linear lifetime continuum, but is actually a different type of thing. It's your multidimensional personality. So the Casey readings, the Seth readings, the Law of One, many other sources all would agree that there is a way to access your multidimensional personality. And from that vantage point, from that higher consciousness, you already know what you're doing here. You already know about the law of karma. So free will and the law of karma are the same thing. Your higher self is going to, this is another name for your multidimensional personality. Your higher self is going to steer you through a learning class, a series of things to educate you about the importance of loving others. Because ultimately, in these philosophical traditions, there is only oneness. There is only one infinite creator, and there is only identity. That's a really, really heavy one. There's only identity. Now, what that means is your identity is not limited by the boundary of your skin to the atmosphere. Your identity is not even bound by the mass consciousness of all the humans on Earth, or the mass consciousness of planet Earth, or the mass consciousness of our sun and our solar system, or even our galaxy. In the Law of One, we have only identity, and there is only identity in the universe. And this whole concept that you are in a separate body is actually false, but it's the creator experiencing itself. This is what the one infinite consciousness decided that it wanted to do in order to have a diverse and robust set of experiences. So that's what we're doing here. We're all living together on this planet thinking that we have separate identities when in fact we're part of a mass consciousness. And this is again why people remember things that they didn't learn, and then multiple individuals invent the same things at the same time. This is called the multiples effect. So in my book, Source Field Investigations, and in my new class, Sacred Science of Microprophecies, we talk about the multiples effect and all these strange things like the invention of the steamboat, the invention of the typewriter, the invention of the thermometer, the invention of the oxygen molecule, the invention of the telescope. Multiple individuals discovered these things pretty much at the same time. And it's a very curious phenomenon because you say to yourself, what's causing this? Where is this coming from? It would appear to be the result of us having cloud computing. That there's a level of your mind that biases all the information you have access to, and it biases it specifically for your personal sense of identity. You have a personal sense of identity which is created by the experiences that you're having, and then you think that all the thoughts that you're having are yours. And we haven't had any training on a societal level on how to differentiate our own thoughts versus the thoughts of others. But as you become a psychic and as you train in psychic awareness, it's extremely important to ask yourself, is this mine or someone else's? What am I really experiencing? And a lot of times you will find out that there are mass consciousness effects, that your mind can be affected when other people are in pain, when other people are in fear. And so one of the main reasons why I needed to get back on this chair and be doing talks right now is that the energetics are really up. So as a result, people are now having a lot more of the negativity as well as a much greater springboard for awakening. But there's people now dealing with various aspects of spirituality that I'm very familiar with, but for most people, they're incredibly unfamiliar with it, and they're not really aware of what they have to do or how to handle it. So before I go any further, I do want to say that all of this has turned into 7 prophetic books, and I now have 7 books and 11 videos available at thedisclosure.com. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we created a product, and this is what I did for the last 2.5 years, was just write these 7 books where I took the Archangel Michael readings from 96, 97, 98, 99, and 2000. And I discovered over the last 2.5 years that as I would unseal them, meaning as I would reread them for the first time in many cases since I'd looked at it in 98, 99, whatever, they were predicting all the stuff that's going on now. Very clear indications of all of the most recent presidents going back in history, very specific long narratives on each one of them, including the current Joe Biden. There's lots of stuff about him in there. There's several references to Kamala Harris. And it's so amazing. The scope of what the books are saying has kind of left me stunned. I've been letting them go out there and be read. And people are really having some very exciting awakenings from this. The comments and the feedback we've been getting are really extraordinary. So this is the only product I have right now. So I just want to put this out there that if you put in the code Jubilation, you're going to get a very, very generous discount. And everything that we have on video is included in this deal. So it's actually something that really helps me. And it's at thedisclosure.com. And because we're still getting trashed by the so-called DS, we really do need your help. And now you're about to see why. In 1999, sort of the crown jewel of the Michael prophecies was that he predicted that there would be a coup over the military-industrial complex. And that really did not seem possible as of 1999. I was aware of the UFO cover-up. I certainly had read lots of books on UFOs by this point. I was getting my own remote viewing stuff, and it was predicting the future, and it clearly seemed to be some type of human, angelic, extraterrestrial. It talked a lot of Christianity. I wasn't really wanting to have a Christian source. I wasn't asking for it to talk about the Prince of Peace, but it did that a lot. I didn't ask for it to be a Catholic saint or 2 Catholic saints, because there's 2 people speaking, or 2 entities speaking. There's Archangel Michael and Saint Lucia. So this was a very weird thing, because I stopped doing it on the global level in around, I don't know, 2001-ish. And I did clients up until 2005. I had a business online from 1998 to 2005 where I actually did client readings. And people had I had a very, very high success rate with my client readings. Almost everybody who got one, with just 1 or 2 exceptions, was very happy. And I also noticed that my clients would determine the quality of the reading. In other words, how deeply I went into trance while I was on the phone with them. And what I would say was almost entirely a function of their level of spiritual advancement and how much they could meditate. So if I had somebody who could really meditate while they were on the phone with me as I'm in this source, it's like, okay, we are co-creating this experience. Let me get away from the chair a little bit. We're co-creating this experience, so let's try to have a positive flow between the 2 of us. And in those cases, people got astonishing things. There was a case where a woman was writing poetry and songs, and it began quoting from her poems, and then, explaining why she had written these things and what was the subconscious message of it. Okay, we're a half an hour in. This is good. So again, you know, in spite of all these other things that were going on with clients, in 1999, as I'm publishing this stuff, I had my own website, I put it online, and by 1999, Archangel Michael is saying that there's going to be a coup over the military-industrial complex, and specifically regarding the UFO cover-up. That this whole idea of not getting the truth would be over, and that we're now going to get real information, unlike anything we've ever had before. And in fact, when you go through the Michael prophecies, he's saying that there's going to be a mass human ET contact. And I really didn't even remember most of this stuff, honestly. I would be entranced when I transcribed it. And then in 1999, I started uploading all of it onto my website in raw form, which is almost unreadable. That's why you really need it to be formatted, especially to explain all the prophecies and everything. And in some cases, I have to rearrange the dreams and make them easier to understand, explain things that very occasionally I had to explain some things in dreams that I'd forgotten, but almost always it's just out of the transcript, and in the dreams I might improve the sentences a little bit, but when it comes to the readings, I don't change anything. And what's happened is, again, it created 7 books. So at thedisclosure.com is where that's located, and I really do hope you'll help us out, because right now is the best time to hit the ground running with the videos and the books. I mean, this is where it's all coming to a head. Everything that I was told about by Michael in the 90s, he said that there's going to be a complete defeating of the UFO cover-up, but it wasn't until I unsealed the books now, beginning in 2022, that I realized what the real message was. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But getting back to this, he did predict this coup over the military-industrial complex. And then I saw various pieces of evidence online, but it really was in 2009 that I met this insider, Pete Peterson, and he told me that he was part of this thing called the Alliance. And I'd always heard it called the Alliance. Or I guess I came up with the name because it just needed a name and it seemed like a good name. I'm not really sure how it came about. But anyway, we were talking about this thing called the Plan, and it was this idea that ever since the 1950s, as I've said many times, Howard Hughes started to wonder why he was losing all of his aerospace contracts to competitors, even though he had better prices, better products, etc., or his ideas were getting stolen, knocked off, ripped off. And we've been seeing that as well with Stavati Aerospace, but that's a whole other discussion. It's very fascinating, actually, but we could talk about that later. So Howard Hughes started to do investigative research using female sex couriers to find out why he was losing all these contracts, and then he found out that there was an organized group involved in all this, and that they were essentially, they had something called vertical integration. All right. Yeah, we gotta bring out, call in, mate. So if you want to understand a bit about vertical integration, okay, let's talk a little bit out of school here, mate. You got all these different companies, and they come together, and they're vertically integrated, and you don't think that they know each other, mate. You don't think that they're connected, but somehow they are, and that's the real secret of the vertical integration. It's the secret combination, mate. It's all these different things that you wouldn't think of as working in collusion, and yet they're somehow together. All right. Come on, you got to allow me a few of those here and there. People love it. So, said, too bad all the videos of Pete Peterson were removed by YouTube for speaking the truth. Please speak more of Pete Peterson and all he shared with you. Oh my God, I knew I felt the Pete vibe. Rub a silver spoon or other silver on your sty and it will go away. Okay, well, I've been doing the colloidal silver, but you know, it hasn't exactly worked yet, so I'm just trying to do my best here. Geez, I miss these talks. The code is Jubilee. No, the code is Jubilation. Let me go back to that. Thank you for asking. Boom. So that's the code, and you don't need the lines around it. It is, again, an extremely generous, what I'm offering compared to any other deal I've done before. It's only going to be for a limited time, brings it down to $250. But again, you've got 11 and a half hours of video that I did with over 1,000 slides called Sacred Science of Michael Prophecies. And it's amazing because it's loaded with all of this knowledge about what the crop circles are teaching us and the real sacred science that Archangel Michael brought to us, because in addition to bringing in the readings, I was guided through a very prolonged amount of scientific research. A lot of it came out of the Law of One, and I just felt really fascinated. So somebody, Sweep says, I missed my boy. Coconut oil heals a lot. David, no, please don't do the English accent. Not everybody loves it, just do you. No English accent. Some people really like it, so you just have to kind of roll with it, mate. Does Archangel... Oh my God. Okay, we're getting rid of that guy. Yep. So we're not interested in trolls. You know, that's not really what we're doing here. But anyway, let me just get back to where we were, because there's some really cool stuff going on. So again, I was briefed on this plan by Pete Peterson. Now, Pete Peterson, yeah, it's a very, very strange set of information that I got from Pete Peterson, because in his reality, there are deep underground military bases, or DUMBS, and those are actually much more plentiful than we realize. Pete said there was over 270 of them that were just built by the American portion of the military-industrial complex. And I've also heard from a number of insiders, and this goes back for many years and many different people who I interviewed in great depth, that there are extraterrestrial humans, people who look like humans, but they project into physical human bodies, and they, or in some cases, they're from other planets, and they look like, you know, human-like, but they're different. We have apparently people with all different pastel colors, pastel yellow, pastel pink, all these different interesting combinations, and that's all part of the reality. There's, according to Sergeant Clifford Stone, who was one of the Disclosure Project witnesses on May 5th, 2001, or it was May 9th, 2001, he said there was 57 different varieties in a field handbook that he'd gotten from this colonel in the Air Force. And these 57 varieties were almost all human, but this is what they were seeing inside various ships that had crashed here. So it's fascinating, because it turns out that we have a robust human community. We now know from NASA's own data that there's something like 80 million Earth-like, or 80 billion Earth-like planets, 40 to 80 billion Earth-like planets just in our galaxy. Think about that. At least 40 billion Earth-like planets with water, and then it appears that DNA, according to my scientific research, it's just intrinsic in the background energy of space and time itself. If you have drops of water, they will naturally form DNA in them, just in the presence of other water that has DNA in it. So the Law of One talks about this. And it says that photons are much more than just light packets that travel through the air. Photons are geometric, vibratory packages of information, which, when they become second density photons, they carry the information to make animal life, animals, plants, everything else except humans. Third density photons carry the information to make human life. And fourth density photons carry the information to make a new type of human being with apparently a much more energetically dense body. So this is one of the strange things, is that the esoteric work that we're looking at says that this is all going to lead to a non-catastrophic global ascension. And the global ascension involves the return of our Heinz 57 human family, their galactic human brotherhood and sisterhood. They actually have a higher ethical standard because they've learned the law of karma, absolutely, and they see it as a mathematical certainty. It has to be followed. It's always worked out. And as what you could think of as angelic beings, this is very important. You are constantly surrounded by living, intelligent, higher beings. You can't necessarily perceive them in the room around you, but they're very much there. They're very much present. And they are conveying information to you at all times. They're at the very least, sending you love. And so when you tune into the feelings of love, according to the Law of One, you're going to feel more of what these beings are sending you, and you're going to have the ability to amplify that love. They also say in the Law of One that the concept of two angels on your shoulder, or an angel and a demon, is exactly the way the universe really works. This is a very, very curious thing, where it appears that when you are living in truth with love and peace and forgiveness and harmony, and you're not lying to people and you're not deceiving people and you're doing your best to be a good person and to have humility and patience and honor and to do your duty with a sense of true responsibility. These are all different levels of ageless wisdom, spiritual discipline. The disciplined personality is a very important one as you get up into like the fifth chakra, or the throat chakra, as it's called. That's associated also with the color of light blue, where the root chakra is red. The next one is orange. Then you have yellow at the solar plexus, green for the heart, light blue for the throat, dark blue for the pineal gland, third eye, and then violet for the crown. These colors actually do carry some type of photonic corollary. So we are now getting hit with fourth density green photons. They're not green to our eyes because we're only looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, but they are green photons. So as we've talked about before, there was an experiment in Russia that was very central on this, where the eggs of a frog were zapped with a laser. The eggs are inside a little hermetically sealed container. These are frog eggs. You shoot a laser beam through that into another container with salamander eggs. Well, actually, no, it was the other way around. You shoot the beam through the salamander eggs into the frog eggs. And that salamander energy is transferred by nothing other than the laser. There's no actual air contact. They're both in hermetically sealed containers, both tissue samples. But then these frog eggs over here are transformed by the salamander laser light, and they turn into, the frog eggs mutate into salamander eggs. And so this, to me, is a very compelling demonstration of a mechanism for species evolution that was totally overlooked by Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, of course, gives us this concept that evolution is the result of random mutations. But as I talk about in Sacred Science of Michael Prophecies in far more depth, we've tried to mutate fruit flies. They breed the fastest of any species. Nothing that we've ever done does anything to them except to make more fruit flies. And certain mutations that we create, where they lose their eyes, for example, there's a self-correcting mechanism. In other words, if we create a mutation where we have two parents who don't have eyes, and we breed them, within no more than 5 generations, no matter what, their eyes always come back. So there appears to be some type of living field of energy that tells the universe how to make a fly. And if the fly doesn't have eyes, the eyes within 5 generations will be restored in the DNA code. So if the DNA code, when it's missing, you can't get that back, that's what you would think if it was just like a book and you rip some pages out of the book, you're never going to see those pages again. But that's not what DNA is really doing. DNA is actually tuning into something, and as a result, you're not getting the same effect that you thought you would get. You're getting a frog egg turning into a salamander egg, mutating in 1 generation. They grow up into adult salamanders, and they have no evidence of ever having come from a frog. They can breed with other adult salamanders, and they give birth to salamanders. So this is very, very, very curious. And I realized right then and there that this explained the so-called missing link, which we've never found, to how we get from a doubling of the size of the skull as we get towards some of the more recent proto-man forms, or proto-human. There's a sudden increase in the brain size by almost double, and it happens basically out of nowhere. So when I started to read the Law of One, we find out that there are these 25,000-year cycles, and Pete Peterson confirmed this on his own, that these higher-level human ETs are very aware of some type of cyclical pulsation that lasts 25,000 years. And Jacob, the insider that I was making fun of with the glasses, had talked about how there are, beings who very much pay attention to this 25,000-year cycle, because apparently, according to him and many others, there's a big solar flash at the end of the cycle, and it cooks everything in your solar system. Every 25,000 years, you just get This big crazy thing that happens. So let's have some comments for a second here. Who's the scientist from Area 51 that wears a gold crown with a crystal in the middle? I don't know. Let's see. They don't hear what he even says. They just say it hasn't happened yet. They haven't looked into anything clearly. Everyone hit the button for David. Thank you for all of your great info. Infinite love and blessings, fellow sovereign soul, siblings, fellow multidimensional, infinite, eternal, radiant, divine, sovereign, golden light beings. Okay. So the point is that if you look at the messages that the Law of One is sharing, that many other sources have shared, there is this 25,000-year cycle, which, according to multiple insiders I spoke to, they do expect a massive solar energy release at the end, and they thought it was catastrophic. And so this seems to explain why many governments didn't even seem to care about pollution or committing crimes. They thought that this big event was going to happen, and it's going to ruin everything on Earth, and we're not going to make it anyway. So that is not the message that came through in these Michael books. The fascinating thing that he said is that this is all leading to a non-catastrophic global ascension. Now, when we say global, what he's actually saying is that if you look at, for example, the teachings of Christianity, the idea is if you follow the basic principles of Christ, right, just to use this software, if you will, this religious software, if you follow these basic principles of love thy neighbor as thyself, you know, kindness, generosity, patience, forgiveness, that you will, this is, again, you know, getting into the real weeds of Christianity. They say you will be born again, and a lot of people have a hard time with that unless they're evangelicals. But we don't really necessarily know what that means, and I think that it's another reference to ascension, just like the concept of rapture. Now, typically, you think of the Christian concept of rapture, and a lot of times it's built around passages in the book of Revelation that have the number 144,000. And there's this idea that if you read the book of Revelation, as I did in my last crop circle prophecy video, there's some pretty compelling stuff in there that looks like the world's going to be destroyed. And it looks pretty scary. And then in Revelations 11:11, it says, after the 3.5 days, the righteous ones who were struck down by the masses rose up and put fear into the hearts of many. They then rose up into the air, and in that same hour, earthquakes shook the earth. Now that's a sloppy paraphrase. I don't have it exactly, but I'm in the ballpark. So they rose up into the air, struck fear into the hearts of many, because apparently they're glowing and they have these big booming voices and stuff. And in that same hour, earthquakes shook the earth. So now you have 39,830 denominations of Christianity all competing with each other. It's literally almost 40,000. And many of them are kind of apocalyptic. Well, some of them are, and they want to get into what's going to happen in the end times. You know, are we... And the idea would be, well, yeah, I want to be in the group that's with the chosen people. You know, I want to make sure that I'm chosen too. And so if I play along with this stuff, and if I say what they tell me to say, and I show up on Sunday, then maybe I'm going to get to make it. Okay, that's a very traditional fundamentalist paradigm, which most other people who are not into that paradigm probably laugh at it or scoff at it, think it's something to make fun of. I'm not really making fun of it at all. I'm actually saying that if Jesus had not succeeded in his mission, then most of the planet would have been lost, and the prophetic timeline in the book of Revelation would have happened. But according to what is being said in the Michael prophecies, again, with this incredible amount of prophetic data on page after page after page through all 7 books, it's just staggering. And I am going to be, you know, as I get more comfortable with this now, I'm going to be putting out more of it into videos and stuff. I just needed to get my feet wet here and get back on the camera. But the point, again, is that it's leading to a non-catastrophic global ascension. And that means that if Jesus succeeded in his mission, according to what Archangel Michael is telling us, if Jesus succeeded in his mission, that means everybody on earth, or almost everybody, except for maybe very, very few, who are just really diabolical, evil folks, but just about everybody on earth is going to go through something that he calls the first wave of ascension. Now, what he explains is that the sun is going to give off some type of energetic change And when that happens, we are now in a completely multidimensional consciousness that really is unprecedented. I don't even think if you've had experience with mind-altering substances of any variety, even the most outrageous psychedelic entheogens, I don't even think that that really adequately describes what this is. I have decided to call it stretch space because part of what was going through my experience list here is I had an apparition of Mother Mary show up in my kitchen. It was very incredible. In fact, it's probably the most intense thing I've ever had happen to me. It looked like the Virgin Mary of Guadalupe, where you see Mary inside this lens that has, you know, the same, it's the Vesica Piscis. She was inside the Vesica Piscis. This is what I saw. And what was strange about it, too, was that there were these golden rays coming out of her, and they were connected into everything and through everything. And I saw how, as she moved, the rays moved, and I could feel everything moving through me. But where it really got bizarre was that as this thing appeared, this apparition, I mean, to say it even as a gender is probably not accurate, but it was mostly like Mother Mary. I felt my consciousness and I felt my sense of touch stretch out on the rays. And when your tactile sensation first leaves your body, and even just like your face starts peeling off, like part of your face is going over here, part of your face is going over here, there's a strip going this way, there's a strip going this way. You just get stretched, man. I don't know how else to explain it. But after a while, you kind of learn that this is just a sense of touch that you didn't have before, and you can actually really connect with your environment through this method and feel things. I just found out the other day that if you are sensing stretch space, which you can do in deep meditation, I put my hand over the kettle, and as the water changed from liquid to boiling, I had this incredible sense of like energetic popcorn all up and down my arm, and that was the rays suddenly changing as a result of the phase shift of the water. So that was a very, very interesting experience. I've had a variety of really compelling experiences since I started unsealing these books, including a lot of telekinesis. But again, the bottom line message that if I was just going to try to distill everything down to its core is that the mission of Jesus actually worked, and that as a result, we are not going to have our planet destroyed. It's very fascinating. Michael had me point out and discover that on the day of December 21st, 2012, when I'd been predicting a solar flash for so many years leading up to this, from at least 2007, 2008, I was all on 2012. So on the very day that I expected this to happen, it did happen on the star next door to us, which is Proxima Centauri. It's part of the Alpha Centauri system. So on that very day, it's around December 24th, 2012. So it's like the closest we can get by calculating how light moved. It was like 3 days apart. But there literally has been a solar flash on that very day next door to us that was 1,000 times brighter than usual, that would have cooked everything alive on the surface of the planet. I don't know why these guys in the comments section act like I have no evidence, or they just say whatever they feel like saying. It's not most of you. There's a few. And, you know, I don't engage on it. But the point is, there's so much evidence in these books. There's so much evidence I can't even begin to get through all of it right now. But how in the hell did we get a solar flash exactly like we were expecting within 3 days of the deadline, based on easily calculated math that Proxima Centauri is 4.424 light years away? I forget exactly what it is, but something like that. So it's when you do the numbers, which I've got in previous YouTube videos, you can watch free of charge on this channel. YouTube.com/David Wilcock 333 is where you always want to go. That's my custom link, David Wilcock 333. And you also got to look under the live tab and not just under the videos tab, because a lot of times I have a live stream coming up, but I haven't uploaded a video. So that's important. And of course, please subscribe too. Click the bell and subscribe, because like I can never quite make it to 500,000 subscribers, but I've been so close for like, my God, 3 years. So if you could subscribe, that'd be awesome. I don't normally ever say that, but actually it would be cool if you did. So anyway, I do want to get out here more. I feel like we're in the final sequence now. That's one of the main things the Alliance has been showing us. And it's very exciting for me because, again, within 3 days of when I had prophetically expected a solar flash on December 21st, 2012, within 3 days, it actually happened next door. Are you telling me that's a coincidence? Now, the dork in the comments says, ooh, okay, fine, but you can say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want, but it's within 3 days, and it's the same thing. Stars don't usually do this. They don't just usually give off a brightness flare 1,000 times brighter than usual, okay? They don't usually give off this massive amount of energy that's so huge that it would cook everything in the solar system. But that happened when the ancient prophecies told us to expect it here. And so as I did the science on this, I realized that this is because the 25,000-year cycle is actually an orbit of our sun and planets orbiting around Alpha Centauri. And to really, really simplify it, when they get closest to each other, there's an energetic exchange. You could think of it sort of like lightning. It's something like that. And it happened over there, but it didn't happen over here, at least not yet. Well, what we find out is that, yeah, it is going to happen here, but it's being delayed. And it's being delayed in order for us to get our stuff together. So you've heard me talk about this before, but it's so fascinating because Michael wrote these 7 books and had me explain the sacred science of it all in the Sacred Science video course. Again, it's 11 different videos totaling 10.5 hours of content, loaded with slides, 7 camera angles. It's amazing. I really put my all into this, and it's a worthwhile product. Again, Jubilation, Jubilation, at thedisclosure.com gets you a massive discount that I never offered before, basically because the DS keeps hammering us down. We haven't been able to close on a deal yet, and so, you know, the financial thing is still a big deal, big problem for us. But we're getting through it, and I have a movie coming out. A lot of you have been asking about Levitation. Levitation is due to come out now, most likely, I'm going to say early summer, so hopefully by June, maybe even before then. We're actually just about ready to get a rough cut of the film right now. There's a big surprise about the narrator. I can't say who it is yet, but I'm very, very excited. It looks like we are going to close with this one narrator who you'll love. It's going to be amazing. So I'm very happy about that. And they've really geeked out on this film. We have a number of great insiders. It's going to have Dr. Stephen Greer. It's going to have Dr. Stephen Greer's latest insiders, including Michael Herrera and trying to remember the other guy's name. But anyway, we've got some incredible stuff coming out in this movie, and it's going to be, I'm going to get to see it pretty soon, rough cut. I talked about a whole bunch of things, including the concept of levitating saints and what is the motile force that lifts humans off the ground when they're in this exalted angelic consciousness. Because, you know, this, believe it or not, is actually a fairly common thing that you hear about. It shows up in Tibetan Buddhism with Padmasambhava. He levitates up into the air with like 23 of his devotees, and then he achieves a rainbow body, and his body dematerializes into rainbow-colored light at the end of his life. Very, very fascinating. So what I'm saying is that this solar flash that was supposed to happen here did not happen here, but it happened next door. And then the other thing that we read about in the book of Revelations was the pole shift. Well, beginning in book 2, I found out that the Edgar Cayce reading that predicted a pole shift, a non-catastrophic pole shift beginning in 2001, actually came true. A Chinese scientist named Professor Xiaodong Song actually discovered that the Earth's inner core had a pole shift that started in 2001, exactly the year Cayce's reading said that it would, and ended in 2013. That's right, it ended in 2013, and it hasn't moved anymore. There was a pole shift inside the Earth. The core moved, as predicted by Edgar Cayce in the 1930s. It moved in 2001, and it stopped right after the Mayan calendar end date, when the explosion takes place next door at Proxima Centauri. Once again, this has all the fingerprints of a higher angelic consciousness using some type of super advanced technology, if you want to call it that. I would probably liken it to a pairing with the sun, a pairing with the full civilizational power of the sun to create massive energetic change, that our sun itself is holding back this energetic explosion so that we don't have a pole shift, and the Earth's axis did have to turn, which it did, but nothing happened. So to have the Earth's axis turn exactly when Edgar Cayce told us that it would, stopping exactly when the Mayan calendar told us it would stop, and a non-catastrophic solar flash happens over there, it's catastrophic for them but not for us, on Proxima Centauri 3 days around the Mayan calendar end date. This is absolutely incredible. And apparently, we now have so much more going on because Michael tells me in the 1990s that instead of looking at the Mayan calendar end date as 2012, that perhaps you should see it as the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of December 26th, 2020. He actually said this. He actually gave us an exact date. He said, I like that as the Mayan calendar end date better. Well, of course, we're all still here, so what the heck does that mean? Well, if we look at these other points in time where these energetic nodes were talked about, one of them was 1936, and we discussed that in the books. 1936 is where you have an energetic change where the Earth's core apparently started its polar drift, the beginning of that polar drift that really picked up in 2001. The energetic influences that caused that to happen started to occur in 1936. We also hear in the Law of One that this allowed the permeability of dimensions. In 1936, it became easier for both positive and negative beings to transfer over into our reality. And so this is a really interesting phenomenon because it actually leads to results for both the good and the bad. If you do these negative ceremonies, you will actually see some type of apparition before you. And in this case, it's a negative apparition, but it will talk to you and it will tell you what it wants. And so you've heard about things like Mephistopheles and Dr. Faust. I've learned more recent times that this is actually something that people experience. They experience a hallucination, they experience a communication. They can hear what they're told to do, and they can decide or not decide if they want to go along with it. Now, of course, this sounds dangerous, right? It's like, wait a minute, deal with the devil. What are you talking about? Well, again, anybody who would do this is very, very foolish. But it's not actually eternal anyway, because none of these beings are really eternal. They're created by our thoughts. And this is one of the things that the insiders told me. I mean, even Uncle Jack, who I've been lampooning with the Colin McGeezer character, you know, this is a real insider who I spoke to for many, many years. And he has this outrageous Queensland, Australia accent, and he taught me a lot of funny sayings. And a lot of people think it's really funny. There are some people who are very square and can't laugh at all at it. So you have to kind of do it in little intervals, mate. You don't want to do too much at once because they get a bit bollocksed up from it, if you know what I'm saying, mate. But anyway, it was fun to talk to him. I learned a lot, and we got into depth on many subjects. But he told me that these negative extraterrestrial beings, if you want to call them that, or demonic entities, I guess is another term, they are not real in the same way that we are. Maybe the negative ETs are, but not the lower astrals. They're projections, and they exist based upon, if we see them at all, it traditionally had to be done during certain astronomical alignments. You have to have the planets in the right position, because apparently there's a multidimensional effect that allows them to get in here. The Law of One calls it the window effect. And this does involve, you know, the use of rituals. And so there are certain rituals that are very dark that I don't really want to go into right now because it's all so upsetting. But there's also magical work that's done on a planetary level. And I had multiple insiders talk to me about this as well. That it's about signs and symbols, mate, and what do they put out there? And essentially the idea is, Uncle Jack always talked about the rules, mate. There's these rules in place. And that means that the negative is not allowed to do more than our collective free will authorizes it to. So if we had stayed the way we were as a planet when Jesus showed up 2,000 years ago, we would have had the book of Revelation's end time catastrophe. And it would have happened probably in 1999 or thereabouts, based on this very strange Grand Cross conjunction that literally encodes the 4 beasts of the apocalypse in the Bible, represented in astrology by the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion. Those are the 4 beasts of the apocalypse in the astronomical chart. And there was all kinds of really interesting crop circle formations talking about this August 11th, 1999 conjunction, talking about the different revelations subjects, exposing Christian symbolism to us, very, very interesting things. And again, my contention has always been, and the same thing I heard from Pete Peterson, yeah, there are these entities that apparently live in their native state as energetic orbs. They can hang out in the sun, they can hang out inside the planet Venus and other places. But when they want to interact with our reality, they can create the traditional flying saucer. This is what they use, the traditional silvery disc. It's actually stylized like this. I mean, I found this Turkish lamp, and you can even, let's cut to, it's got the UFO contact written into it here. There's, I said, wow, okay, this is probably the result of some ancient event, and then they even got the very unique shape of the top of the flying saucer correct. So I said, man, I've got to have this on my set. It's just like, it's the best thing ever. So that's what I did. And you can see the top of it right here. I put a little orange rose on there just to kind of spice things up a bit, mate. You know how it goes. Oh, I can't stand it when he does that. I'm sorry. If that upsets you, then you really need to get out more and talk to people, because some of them are Australian. I'm just going to put that out there for you. I'm not trying to upset you. Some of them will be Australian. Anyway, it's a very fascinating thing that I've been working on here, because all of these different communications are telling us that we're leading up to some type of massive global transfiguration, that our own consciousness will change, and that this is something that was held off until December 26, 2020. Now, what was that all about? Again, I mentioned that. Well, according to Archangel Michael, each time these energy surges come up, 1936 was the first one, there was another one in 1971, it corresponds precisely with Watergate and the exposure of negativity. There was another big one that the pyramid timeline called for in 2010. And it has to do with, the 2009 and 10, it has to do with the economic collapse that we had. So as a result of all these different things, 9/11 is another one that was actually predicted in the Great Pyramid timeline. I did some previous videos on that you can watch. The pyramid clearly has Christian iconography in it. It creates the form of a crucifix of light on the ground during the spring equinox. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff linking the pyramid to Christianity that was all being done as research in the 1700s and 1800s. And then they all got called pyramidiates, and everything got buried. But later on, Peter Le Mesurier wrote this book, Great Pyramid Decoded, and it put it all together. It was amazing. So I've already done that stuff. But the point is, the pyramid was built by time-traveling ETs who could see into the future, and they proved it by writing a whole series of prophecies into the passages of the Great Pyramid. And there's so many that are accurate. It's incredible. And they nailed 2001. They nailed the 2009-2010 economic collapse. And then in my books, again, Archangel Michael says December 26, 2020. This is just barely a month after the highly contested 2020 presidential election in America. And it also corresponds within days to when the inoculations first started coming out. So Archangel Michael's message is that the inoculations and this whole COVID scenario is a very, very big part of how we got through this non-catastrophic ascension. It apparently, like 9/11, like some other things that have happened, created enough of an awakening that people can embrace the hero's journey. So in our last show, we talked about communications that are being sent through crop circles. And this was something where in books 5, 6, and 7, I had started to geek out on various formations that appeared in 1999. And so I'm not going to do that again because, again, I just did it last time. No, that's not what I'm saying. We're going to go through the 2023 formations, but the ones in 1999, I haven't actually had the time to build all the slides for. But there was a really very important principle that kind of ties it all together, which is called, it comes out of something in the secret tradition called the Wicker Man. Now there's a movie, I guess it was from 1971, it's actually called The Wicker Man. And I heard about this from actually at least 2 different insiders, one of whom had apparently worked for the Clintons on a covert level. And that's the guy that we call Bruce. So anyway, his intel was that the Wicker Man, first of all, this movie is about this police constable who gets called onto an island where everybody's observing pagan behavior. And this includes dancing around the maypole naked, having sex out in public, doing weird ceremonies that look pretty occult and scary at times. And ultimately, the constable himself is lured into this Wicker Man, which they then set on fire and they burn him alive. So it's a horror movie. The Wicker Man is a horror movie, and the police constable who's investigating this cult on this island is burned alive by them at the end, and they all participate in it. The entire island is in on it. That's one of the things that makes it a horror movie, is they all knowingly get him to dress up in a jester costume, and he's got this outfit on, so he literally is dressed up like the fool, and they get him into a parade, and they convince him that everything's fine, and they dance him through, and they walk him right into this ramp that goes right into the Wicker Man, which is the same thing as Burning Man, right? They supposedly burn a human effigy. Well, in the old days, this was human sacrifice. Oh, and it just got really dark back there as I said that. Isn't that strange? I don't know if you could see that, but like all of the screen windows behind my camera just went really dark, right as I said, wow, that was pretty wild. I got to say, that was pretty wild. Anyway, the Wicker Man movie was illustrated in a dream that I had in the 1990s with the wicker basket. And so there was a wicker basket in my dream, and then they actually drew a wicker basket formation in the crop circles in 1999. I'm going to show you that a little bit later, because this is the foundational shape. It's a series of circles in a radiant pattern, sort of like a snowflake, and the circles are larger on the outside and they get smaller as they go in. But again, what was so amazing about this is just the fact that here I've got this dream about this wicker basket, and it's predicting the downfall of the people who killed JFK Jr. In other words, Michael also said that JFK Jr.'s death was not an accident. It was a very strange airplane crash. There's a lot of strange stuff around that. And they're saying, yeah, you know, somebody didn't want him to run for president because they didn't like the idea of him doing that in 2000 against George W. And apparently he got sloppy and he said something about it on the phone. And he was going to be the golden boy. He was going to be the new king, so to speak, of America, even though you're not really supposed to say that. But this is, you know, he's the boy king, right? He's JFK's son. Wow. And he's this amazing looking guy. He's got beautiful facial features. Women love him. Everybody's behind him. So he would win, you know? And they didn't want that. So his plane crashes. And it was a horrible example of pretty obvious sabotage because there was no real bad weather conditions, and it was happening in, you know, stuff that he had flown in many times before. And there was eyewitness reports of, you know, some kind of explosion in the air suggesting he was hit by something, or that there was a bomb on board, perhaps. Very, very sad. Well, his death is right around this August 11th, 1999 timeline. In fact, I think it was around July 31st, 99, or somewhere around there, right before. So my dreams talked about it. My dreams predicted it in advance. My dreams correlated it with the wicker basket. And then in 1999, among other fascinating things I talk about in the books, the circle makers, whoever they are, which now seems directly connected to Archangel Michael, based on all these codes I got, the circle makers were giving us the wicker basket formation. And that's what they actually called it because it looked like a woven wicker basket. And I didn't even know about Wicker Man and this weird movie where this guy who's investigating them gets ritually murdered by them until, you know, much later. And then when I came back to this, it all started to connect. And I said, wow, it appears that what the crop formations are telling us now and what the Michael books are telling us, I mean, this is the main message, is that wherever the real problems are on Earth, wherever the things are that are making us so sad, that are making us afraid, these things are all going to come to light, these things are all going to be exposed, and these things are all going to be healed. It's not going to stay as brutal and unhappy as it is now. And I want to show you now the crop circles of 2023 with a little bit more specifics than I had before. You can go to cropcircleconnector.com and see this. But these are all the good ones that appeared. So the first one that we talked about in the last video was on May 28th, 2023, Broadhinton, Wiltshire, and it shows the swords of Archangel Michael. That's kind of how it's been interpreted by several people. And it also looks like an image of a bladed fan turbine for vertical takeoff and landing. So here it is. This is actually, I was speaking to our Stavati Aerospace CEO, Chris Beskar, and he says to me, yeah, you know, this is exactly what the latest, greatest fan turbines look like if you wanted to achieve some type of a fan-powered hover car. But we actually have anti-gravity technology, and we're working on getting that out. It's just that obviously, if you're going after something this big, you're going to get a heck of a lot of resistance. So then we have Capriano del Colle in Giulietta, Italy, and this showed up on May 30th, 2023. It seemed to be predicting some type of major event around the October solar eclipse. Now, the October solar eclipse took place on October 14th, and so this was showing you the crop circle formation there on the left, the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon. This is how it's interpreted. It was interpreted by the people who analyze crop circles that this was going to be something big is going to happen around the solar eclipse. Well, as you know, the Israel war broke out just a week before this alignment on October 7th. So only 1 week later is when this eclipse happened. And in the full context of everything else, this is definitely part of the awakening. This is definitely part of what we're going through. So the next one is Pottern Hill, Wiltshire on June 7th. And it shows the sun giving birth to these fourth density photons blossoming. It's interesting that out of all the different messages that they could be giving us, that they would choose something like this. They would choose to show us our sun and the idea of flowering, right? Well, again, there's going to be apparently this first wave of ascension where we will go into stretch space, or whatever you want to call it, early fourth density. You become way more telepathic, you become telekinetic. Before too long, you're going to be able to fly. We're going to turn into superheroes. I mean, this is literally, the beings went to all this trouble and drew all these crop circles to give us these prophecies. We then have Roundway Down, Wiltshire, which on June 11th, which shows us a radar crosshairs formation. So it looks sort of like the crosshairs begun. It also looks like a radar. And again, you know, this was very curiously connected with the idea that the powers that were are in the crosshairs, and they're on the radar. People are seeing them on the radar. People are aware of what's going on. It's been picked up. It's not hidden anymore. The radar is meant to detect what is hidden and bring it to light. Then we have Eastleigh Court on June 18th, Wiltshire. And there's a couple that were like, you know, not any good that I skipped because they were just drawn by idiots who didn't know how to do it. And they're not real extraterrestrial formations. These are obviously very clean and precise. Eastleigh Court, Wiltshire, June 18th. Once again, we see fan blades and the concept of free energy and the tetrahedron. So you see the blades there, and it's like there's these ripples coming off of it, and it's right next to one of these land mounds, which in the pyramid power stuff that I've studied, if you build a mound like this, you're actually going to get usable energy. And so it's almost like the fan blades would represent tapping that energy, much like a water wheel. And again, that's one of the big promises of Archangel Michael. Throughout all these books I wrote, he keeps saying that companies like mine, I'm not the only one, but Stavati Aerospace, we are going to be able to bring out, we have a whole different variety of ways to do clean energy technologies. I'm not talking about wind. I'm not talking about regular solar. I'm not talking about regular anything. We're talking about alternative technologies that draw energy out of the vacuum and therefore do not have to be fueled. You just run them, and it's called free energy because you don't have to pay for anything. And so we are chasing that goal. And of course, energy is being used to control us and hold us down. You have to pay for it. You can cut off a pipeline. People lose food. People lose the ability to cook. People lose the ability to stay warm. Energy is life, and so right now we need these petroleum products, and we need these various sources of energy in order to be able to run our society. So then we have June 26, 2023 in Aylesbury, Hampshire. We have, again, the concept of the all-seeing eye. And as you're going to see, this also has the wicker basket circles in it. So I haven't shown you the original wicker basket formation yet, but it's got the same type of circles as you're seeing here. So once again, it's the all-seeing eye, but it's also this wicker basket, the series of circles. So it's as if, again, what does the wicker basket mean? The wicker basket means that now everybody sees, like everybody on the island, let's say if the island is Earth, the island is now seeing who the jester is, and they're setting him up. Now, again, in the original movie, when these evil people are doing this, they burn somebody. That's not what's going to be happening. That's a metaphor in the Bible, you know, the idea that the sticks will be bundled together and burned. But that's not really what's going on. The Alliance, I always heard in my briefings that it focuses on strictly judicial means, through the rule of law, not through violence, not through unanticipated disastrous things, but as much as possible done by the rule of law. So when you see this formation, you've got your wicker basket circles, and you've got the all-seeing eye, and it looks like the landing lights for a jet airplane. So it's almost like this, being able to see the all-seeing eye, being able to see what's really going on, that's coming in for a landing. And as it happens, this wicker basket thing will occur where they're exposed, and they're going to have to face justice. So then the next one that we have is on July 4th. There's two different images that showed up at Chalandham Lane, Hampshire, both of which seem to illustrate sacred geometry and vibration. So this one goes through eightfold geometry, and it's just very beautiful, and it has a lot of triangular symbolism in it yet. It's also kind of like, if you kind of look at it, it's like almost like the upside down pentagram, but not. But there's some of that kind of Baphomet looking stuff in there. But again, it's being transmuted, and the number 8 actually represents balance and harmony. So it's sort of like it represents the evil being balanced out. So that's the first one that showed up at Chalandham, and the other one was this. This is incredibly interesting, again, because it's almost like it was a direct commercial for Michael Prophecies, because you have ripples of energy inside this square. Now the ripples look like sound waves, which suggests that there's a liquid in there, but then the square suggests geometry, and that's exactly how I explained that the sacred geometry of the photon, how does that geometry appear? It appears through vibration. So this is literally a vibrational diagram of geometry. It's like, wow, they're giving us a science lesson based on what they said in the books. Then on July 7th, we have Norton Plantation, Wiltshire. And there's a womb formation that I had already talked about in books I'd released by then. Books 2 and 3 were already out. And the womb formation arranged into a vast circle. So if you look at this and kind of look at maybe down near the bottom, and you think about the image of a female womb, you can see 3 of these crescents of circles coming together to look like a womb. And then they all extend into a circle. Well, again, what was so crazy about this, if you actually do read the books, is that I had been talking about this womb formation extensively. And there was a formation that showed up on July 4th, 1999, that I called the Trumpet of the Archangel. And it showed Archangel Michael's trumpets coming through this womb formation with a triangle. It was very interesting to see it show up again. And again, it's like they were communicating to me. So then we had Lane End Down, Hampshire on July 9th. Lane End Down was the main wicker basket formation of 2023 that really kind of locks in the similarity. So here it is from far away. And again, you have the image of these circles coming in together. And at the center, it looks like the sun. So just to show you how wild this is and how much it tripped me out, again, it's talking about, obviously, the solar changes, the changes in the sun triggering this wicker basket type of phenomenon, which is the exposure of the negative. And I'm now at the 90-minute point, but I'm gonna try to keep it under 2 hours, but I want to get through these slides. You really need to see this, guys. So anyway, the sun is illustrated by the way the crop lays. You can see that the crop is swirled around in a circle in the middle, and then it has these kind of radiant rays of light coming off it. That's just wheat. It's only like as tall as your knees, really, you know? So now I want to show you the old original and the new wicker basket formation. So again, this is the one that showed up in 2023, and now we're going to compare it to the original 1999 grand finale of the season. This was the big finale, the most beautiful, complex. On the left there, that's the wicker basket. And again, look at them and notice that like in the wicker basket formation, you have 7 rays, which probably symbolizes the 7 rays of consciousness, the 7 rays of the universe in the law of one. And then on the right, you have only 6 rays, as you can see, and there's now hollowness inside the circles, whereas in the other ones, the circles are more like rings. But I mean, these are shockingly similar images. So again, anybody who doesn't think that the crop circle makers are having fun with the fact that the books of Michael Prophecies came out, and I'm literally talking about this formation that you see on the left, okay? The one that you see on the left, the wicker basket formation, and then they come back on July 7th and they draw it very similarly on the right. So again, the wicker basket means the wicker man, which means that we as a collective are now seeing what's going on. We're seeing that these people exist. We're seeing what they do, and we're putting a stop to it with a legal process. The next formation that appeared was on July 9th, 2023, Barton Stacey Belt in Hampshire. And this was seen as the shield of Archangel Michael. In my last video, I talked about the codes on this, but it is also a tetrahedron. And once again, you also have that interesting fan blade pattern. So this was really cool because it also, again, illustrates sort of like a bulging tetrahedral image inside a sphere. Then on July 25th, 2023, we have Hatherton Lane, Hampshire, and this is the infamous bat signal. This became of extreme significance because once again, they drew a wicker basket formation, and it's got the same kind of thing with these, all these circles, but it was also designed in such a way to be perfectly aligned with sunset, so that as you zoom in on the center of that, there is a very clear bat signal type of image, very similar to the image of Batman. And, we could zoom in on that in post, but I guess I thought I had built a slide where it was up close. I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, this became very important because the Alliance sent out a signal in a video they posted that actually had this bat signal in it. And it was a very, very strong confirmation, one of many they've done that I usually haven't publicized, where they are also very excited about the Michael Prophecies and what it says, and they're getting ready to act on it, actually. So this is really cool because, again, the bat signal shows up, and you have your traditional wicker basket formation, these weird circles that go in towards a radiant center off of all these interconnecting radial lines. Then we have July 30th, 2023, Kitts Lane, Hampshire, yet another version of an all-seeing eye. This time, it's the eye in the telescope. Now notice how clever they are, because once again, they've actually created the wicker basket formation. They've actually created the image of the wicker around the all-seeing eye. And as I said in the last video, it looks like this telescope with an eye in the middle, right? You can actually see that very easily when you're looking at it. It's like, whoa. And then it also has, again, the stylized checkerboard wicker patterns in the crop. So given that all of this stuff seems to be about exposing the deep state, we know what the wicker basket formation indicates, and now they got wicker again. It's like the eyes of the world are upon them. They can't hide anymore. They're in the spotlight. They're in the telescope. And again, I'm always advocating for the most ethical treatment possible. If these arrests ever do happen, I'm their best buddy in some ways, because I'm the one that's teaching universal principles of love and spirituality, rather than, oh my gosh, we got to burn them or throw them through a wood chipper or all this kind of stuff. No, 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 no. If you do that, you're not learning the lessons of this global event that we're going through. But a very important point is that as people learn the truth, there is a cognitive shift that they go through. There's a spiritual awakening. And so as people learn what's really going on, even if it's unpleasant, even if they don't like it, it creates a physics change which enhances your own consciousness, enhances your telepathy, enhances your telekinesis, enhances your ability to remember past lives and various things spontaneously. Okay? So this again is all illustrated by the wicker basket eye in the telescope. This group is being exposed. They've run out of time. Everybody sees it for what it is, and they're being led through now their own karmic equivalent of the Wicker Man, which again is not a violent death with fire. We're not barbarians. It's all based on legal stuff. So then we have July 20th, 2020, or July 30th, 2023. We have Combe Hill near Wiltshire. And this is a more rare thing they did. They showed the fivefold geometry, which has got these DNA crescents. I talk about that in the Sacred Science show, and I did in the last video a little bit as well. There were a number of formations that they did where they used double helixes, and then they'd highlight the area between the two lines is kind of like an S curve, like this. And so that looks pretty similar to the S curves that they drew in so many DNA formations, which I've shown in some other shows, and it's also in Sacred Science and Microprophecies. Then we have, this was a really, really provocative one. They can only make crop circles up until about August 10th or August 11th. That's when everybody harvests, and then they mow everything down. So there's no crop circles after August 11th. So as you get closer to August 11th, you're now at the end game, and it's like, wow, what's going to happen? What are they going to say next? Well, in this case, on August 2nd, 2023, right near the end of the season, we have Preston Grange, Hampshire. And this is just an amazing one, because after all of this other stuff that we've been hearing about, you know, the deep state and whatever they're trying to tell us, the NATO symbol appeared prominently. And I talked about this before, but it's again worth reiterating. So here is the symbol that arrived. And again, this is exactly what the NATO symbol is. I mean, there's no ambiguity here. And if you don't believe me, okay, check this out. Here's the original symbol in the crop circle from August 2nd. And then here's a photograph of a NATO meeting, the 50-year anniversary of NATO, where they happen to be around a big, you know, what is that? It's like a five-sided, yeah, look at that. It's a five-sided table. Oh, that's weird, five-sided. And then in the middle of the table is this strange symbol that, again, we had just seen right here in the crops. And it's exactly the same. You got this star diamond inside a circle. The only difference is that here, there's two circles on either side of it, whereas in the original, it's more like the compass rose, and it just has lines. So once again, I wonder what it's trying to tell us. Why would it be, you know, showing NATO? Why would it have highlighted at the beginning of the season this upcoming solar eclipse on October 14th, and then war breaks out a week before that, right? And there's two wars going on right now. There's Israel and there's Ukraine. And so NATO is definitely under stress right now, and they've run out of ammunition, they've run out of manpower, and it's just kind of a bad situation all the way around. So this apparently is all leading to peace. You know, we're not going to have a big war. We're not going to have a big apocalyptic Armageddon. This is what the beings have been telling us. The next one that came out is from August 4th, 2023, and this was at Wayland's Smithy in Oxfordshire, right? And this was a callback to their original crop circle design from the Circle Maker magazine. This again is like the photon, the tetrahedron that I talk about so much in the videos and in other videos I've done here on YouTube. Then we have August 10th, 2023, Clay Hill, Wiltshire. This is right at the end of the season. And this is very fascinating. It's a solar logos. So it shows us the images of the 2012 formation once again. Now, this is the one that we saw on August the 10th, and it's just this round circle in the middle of a ring, but it's a callback to this formation from, I believe, 2008. And in this formation from 2008, we actually have the alignment of the planets as it looked on December 21st, 2012. And what's even weirder is that not only did they get the alignment right, they started with the sun. As you can see, it only goes out to the orbit of Mercury. But then when they came back later on, they drew the sun out to the orbit of Venus. The actual size of that orb that represented the sun expanded to a significantly larger level. And they drew, as you can see, another circle off to the right with all these cell organelles on the outside. And this suggests that biology, as we know it, will be transformed, and we're not going to be really the same biological beings that we were once we go through this first wave. We're going to have an energetic, spiritual activation. So in the last show, I never covered the grand finale of the 2023 season. There was one that I left out. I didn't really understand it yet. I didn't really see where it was going, but this was the last one, and somehow they got it way past the normal deadline. They got one in on August 23rd, 2023 at Roundway Hill. And this is what it looked like. And so I call this the Vegas dice formation. Now what we see is a series of points that are all made of triangles. You take one triangle, you stick it down, take another one, stick it down. So you look at all these points of triangles going around. So again, this is an image of tetrahedrons and photons. And it also appears to be the sun, that it's coming out of the sun in the center, inside that circular line. Then inside the sun, we have a very obvious stylized Las Vegas dice. And what was so weird about this is that I had just been to Las Vegas for an investment meeting for Stavati Aerospace. And so it was an incredibly fascinating thing. In fact, the investor who we met with has simply not been able to withdraw his funds. He's been blocked. He's trying to withdraw enough funds that he could pay for what we need to get going, but his financial institution keeps giving him what we call the Tuesday-Friday game, mate. On Friday, they tell you it's coming on Tuesday, and on Tuesday, they tell you, don't worry about it, mate. The money's coming on Friday. I assure you, me brother. Well, that's the Tuesday-Friday game, and it's really silly. A lot of people put their money into these things, and they keep getting told the money is coming, and it never really does. But I had just been to Las Vegas, the land of dice, and I'm writing about these crop circles, and then they showed this dice image. So it really freaked me out, actually. I didn't even really want to take credit for this at the time. I just kind of said, yeah, I'm just not really going to talk about this. I'm just going to kind of leave this alone because it's just not really, something that I'm all that into. I'm not into the crop circles like showing me this incredible thing. But again, notice when they're inside the dice part, what does it also look like? Oh, that's right. It's your good old friend, the wicker basket, mate. We got the same thing all over again with the rings inside rings and on these interconnecting rays, mate. And there's 6 of them once again. So yeah, the Vegas dice has the wicker basket formation inside of it. It's quite amazing. And here it is once again. You see the dice, and there's people standing in there, and they got a blanket there. That's what that is. And so again, wicker basket is prominently illustrated. This is another version of it from a wide shot taken on an angle. You can see it also has that wicker-like fluffing on the sides. And then this is an overhead view of it. So it's very interesting because it's almost like an invitation from the higher forces to roll the dice, take a chance, take a gamble, and start doing disclosure. And again, this came out on August 23rd. So just 1 month later, on September 24th, it appears that the Alliance, or whoever is responsible for this, in U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they declassified 10 new videos of UFOs. And this is on Daily Mail, which, I try to just copy everything and run out of there as fast as I can because of all the ads. I don't really like that. But anyway, this is what it said. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the agency responsible for keeping terrorists and their weapons out of the country, uploaded 10 videos that appear to show craft moving in strange ways in our skies. Oops, that's not supposed to be there. The videos were released on August 9th. Hey, wait a minute. August 9th? Isn't that like 2 days before the finale of the crop circle season? As all these comms are being sent out by Archangel Michael and these crop formations, also duplicated in the books that he wrote? Did the Alliance follow up on this? And the answer is yes. They released it on August 9th, right at the peak of the crop circle season, 2 days before the all-important August 11th date. They were released on August 9th without warning, a press release or much in the way of context, only to be discovered by UFO enthusiasts and online sleuths earlier this week as of September 23rd. Asked by NBC News, Chris Mellon, a former official with the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, described this release as very significant. This will help the public understand what our military personnel are encountering all over the world, he said. We're getting on the Defense Department side 50 to 100 UFO reports per month. What? 50 to 100 UFO reports per month? Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And this is happening globally, so this is not very uncommon. It's happening overseas. It's happening off the East Coast and the West Coast. This will help people better understand why Congress takes the issue seriously and why it's a national security issue. This past June, charges of an illegal hidden UFO crash retrieval program operating within the shadows exploded across television airwaves. June is again right during the crop circle season, and online, made by Air Force Intelligence Agency veteran David Grush. Soon thereafter, Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Marco Rubio revealed he too had been briefed by several other U.S. government officials with top-level security clearances who professed that they personally had first-hand knowledge of UFO programs. By late July, Grush was reasserting many of his claims under oath before the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, along with Ryan Graves, an esteemed former pilot, and veteran Navy fighter pilot Commander David Fravor, who witnessed the now famous 2004 Tic Tac UFO. So this really was astonishing because we have people testifying in front of Congress, David Grush and others, that they have personally been briefed on this, and a lot of people got annoyed with Grush. It does appear that he was threatened, probably very violently. It sounds like it was something really grotesque and scary. And so he was able to talk at first, and now he's kind of had to repeat the things that he said at the beginning, but he passed a briefing document to these members of Congress that have summaries of an enormous amount of information that various insiders have told him about their work with these classified UFO retrieval programs and with the extraterrestrials and beings involved. And so we really don't know what Congress has been told. We really don't know how far this goes. But my imagination loves to run wild, and so I imagine that it's very robust. When we finally get the truth, it's going to be very robust. And I think it's going to come down to the idea that there are positive extraterrestrials, and we call those angels in the Bible, and I've delineated where they arrive. There's plenty of references to saucers in the book of Ezekiel in the Old Testament. There's references to Jesus being born up in the clouds at the end of the time he had on earth in one of these kind of craft. There's so many interconnecting pieces, like the Saint Germain contacts in the 1700s. People were encountering a human extraterrestrial who could transmute diamonds. You could give him like 6 diamonds, and then he'd grow them into one single diamond in his hand and give it back to you, and now it's worth much more money. He wore all these jewels and rubies and diamonds on his clothing, so he had a very flashy way of dressing. And Archangel Michael appears to be involved with this somehow, because there's a letter that I talk about where Saint Germain wrote this letter to Voltaire, or Voltaire wrote a letter to Saint Germain, and he said that he came in a flying disc, and then it was even illustrated in one of his books, Micromegos, by Voltaire. And Micromegos is about ETs coming to Earth and you know, surveying our planet from space. Interestingly enough, he wrote this story, and then he illustrated the craft that the story illustrates, and it is a flying saucer, but it's from the 1700s. And there's also Voltaire's letter where he says, "You will return in the 1950s, and I look forward to seeing you then when the talking pictures, and seeing your talking pictures." So it appears that Saint Germain had some type of box that showed Voltaire these images of the future, and he said he was going to return in the 1950s. And sure enough, there's tons and tons of 1950s human ET contacts that I've talked about for many years, which I finally got it all together and summarized it in book 4. So that took an enormous amount of time, and I'm very, very proud of that, because it's the friendship case in Italy, multiple examples of angelic ET channeling contacts in America, and then the work of W.B. Smith ties it all together. They found 200 questions they were asking everybody. There's all these people saying they were channeling UFOs. But a certain number of people got all 200 questions right. And then the beings would actually say, yeah, we want to come and we want to do a landing. Through this one woman, Frances Swan, they actually said, we have 5,000 ships that are going to appear in your skies. They want to do this in the 1950s and reveal themselves to us back then. And their offer was refused. So another source that I've been using quite a bit is the Alliance. I call it the Alliance, but it's just the Ezra posts. And there was a major warning the day after this whole thing started. And so here's the link from that. It says, a major trap has been set for the U.S. military by the Z's. And I'll get to that in just a second. I don't think all the Z's are negative at all, but there's incredible strife going on between different factions. We see this within Israel. So I would please ask you not to denigrate any group of people, including the Z's. There's plenty of good people in the Z's. But also, it appears that what this briefing is saying is that within that group, there's a more hardline faction. We're seeing this play out in the protests and all the things that are going on. And this briefing had some pretty shocking stuff in it. It said, if we take the bait, we will fall immediately as a superpower. And that's exactly what they're looking for. Watch the Strait of Hormuz. And then he gives this address here. So this was shocking enough that I came forward and I said, I need to tell people what I think this is. And I did do that, and it got uploaded into my October 23rd. I would only recommend watching the last one on October 23rd, the Crop Circle Prophecies video, because I post-produced it. I got everything right. I had a lot of mistakes in the beginning. And one of the mistakes that I found so annoying was that I had this wire on my shirt. As you can see, the microphone wire had hooked up over the top of the microphone. For me, that was so annoying, so I had to zoom in on it. And anyway, it was really good to get that stuff out and to get these warnings out to humanity. So again, we're gonna go to here. So I actually do have the slides for it, thankfully, the bat signal wicker basket formation. And then I want to show you the original again, and then the response that we got. If the button will work. Let's see if this is gonna, Okay, sorry about that. This is all live and things happen. There's some crumb under the button or something. I don't know here. Okay, here we go. Now it's animating. So that's the original shape, and then when you zoom in on it, as I'm now doing here, you can actually see that there is, in fact, a stylized bat signal there, and that's very cool. So then I was really, really jazzed when the Alliance on November 3rd, 2023, in this case through a post on Twitter, kind of did a send and receive and said, yes, we see the bat signal communication. So this particular individual, Dan, put this up, as you can see here, on November 3rd, 2023. And you're 4 seconds in right here. It was posted at 12:32 a.m. There's all kinds of interesting codes involved here in terms of the numbers and what they correspond to. But they used motion graphics right around the 4-second mark to have this image of the bat signal. And this is while the presidential convoy is going down in all their black SUVs. So once again, on November 3rd, not that long after this bat signal formation showed up in August, here it is again in a comm from the Alliance. So it's almost as if they want to tell the extraterrestrials who are drawing these formations, hey, we're on your side. We believe in what you're doing. We support you. And honestly, I found this highly intimidating. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to take credit for this. I'm not into publicity, and I'm not into trying to get a lot of eyeballs. So I just let go of it, and I'm only now doing it because I feel like there's been a number of communications they've sent out, and I'm going to do another show pretty soon if we have the time. But anyway, there's a lot of things that we're going to be learning. So many of the things that Michael Prophecies talk about are appearing in shows and podcasts from many of the top influencers in the conservative or truth community. And an example would be that on December 16th, 2023, we have Tucker saying that the UFOs have a really dark component. He makes ominous comments on the truth behind UFOs. It is really dark. There's a spiritual component there that I don't fully understand. And it also is, trending. It was the second most popular video. So the really dark spiritual component that he doesn't truly understand, well, this gets into the idea that there are negative extraterrestrials and that they are actually very, very evil, And if you fall into alignment with them, you're going to end up doing the most heinous stuff. And so the Michael Prophecies talks about how we are essentially in a proxy war between good and bad ETs. And that's what the Bible was describing and all these other sacred texts were describing. We didn't really have the knowledge necessarily to understand what we're being told. But ever since 2009, when I first got these briefings, I was told that we're going to have some kind of a blackout as the final stages take place. Final stages of what? Final stages of arrests. These will be lawful arrests, but they will have to be conducted as a joint operation, and that joint operation occurs during a blackout. Now again, I've been leaking this publicly since 2009, so nobody can say, oh, David is making this up. No, no, no. I've always been talking about the blackout. Now, based on all these very, very intricate communications that I'll unpack in the future if we have the time, there are clear indications that we are heading into this very, very soon. Okay? Very, very soon. But I don't necessarily think most people are going to lose their power. It appears that the power will be protected, but we might lose all internet. And it might go down possibly for days at a time. And so during that time, the only way you'll be able to get information is by, like, for example, AM radio, FM radio, shortwave. Telephone calls might not work unless you happen to still have a landline. And in the event that this starts to happen, if you have days and days of a power or internet type of blackout, I would say don't worry about it. Don't freak out about it. We see actually very intense narratives being put out there in the form of this Netflix show, Leave the World Behind, which is just about the most paranoid piece of fear porn you could ever imagine. It's describing electric cars driving together, big old boat crashes. People start losing their teeth because of electromagnetic frequencies hitting them. All the power goes down. It's kind of like an end of the world scenario. And it's been widely criticized because the characters are all like saying to each, like the black characters in the film say, oh, you can't trust any white people. So there's this whole sort of pre-planning in place to talk about a blackout, to talk about it being terrifying. The last thing Julia Roberts does at the end of the show is she's finally going to sit down in this ominous moment and watch the last episode of Friends, which she's never actually seen before because she didn't want to see it. But you get the sense that she just expects there's going to be nukes coming after her. They're about to die. They're about to run out of food. They're about to run out of something. And it's all coming to an end. Now, what's really strange about this is that it was produced by Barack Obama. And a lot of people have already talked about this, and there's a whole lot of stuff out there, but people claim that they found weird extra audio tracks that might have had some frequencies in there, which is one of the reasons why I never watched it. But it's like, wait a minute. Even I've been getting therapeutic massage, and even my body worker had seen Leave the World Behind, but she had no idea at all that it was based on anything that I've been talking about since 2009, nor that it was done by Obama, nor that it had a kind of a fearful spin to the information that was looking like the end of the world and some type of brewing race war. Now, I don't believe that's at all what we're going to see. I just don't. I think instead what we're going to see is maybe telephones are down, and there's probably going to be the emergency messaging system on your phone. It will probably be playing videos. There's a number of indications of this. So again, I encourage you in all possible ways not to be afraid, not to get freaked out by this. And here's another reason why. This is another interesting thing that came out on that same channel, the Ezra channel I just showed you the link to, Shadow of. This is on December 31st, 2023, and they posted this with some text, and I'm just going to show you the image. It says the reported UFO sightings of 1906 to 2014, and you'll notice the vast majority of all the reported UFO sightings that have ever happened during this period of time are in the U.S. Now this, to me, very strongly suggests, just like what they're doing with David Grush in Congress, just like the U.S. Customs and Border Protection declassifying the 10 videos, they're trying to get us ready for the fact that we've been making UFOs in America covertly for a long time. These are not all just extraterrestrials, folks. Why would the extraterrestrials love to come to America so much? That doesn't make any sense. These UFOs are secret craft that we have been testing in these covert projects for decades. And that's why, again, all of the sightings, the majority of them are either right over Great Britain, as you can see, or they're right over America. So then in January 6, 2024, there was a weird underlying story going on here. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was hospitalized. The White House wasn't aware of it for days. This is a very strange thing because it appears that from some of the briefings, he might have been involved in something nefarious that they were trying to plan, and he got caught, and he got pulled into a briefing of some kind, and he's not allowed to talk about it. So this is just an example of one of those. There's probably many of them. And I am now at the 2-hour mark, so I'm going to wrap it up really soon. But then we get to January 8th, 2024, and they show the life insurance thing again, which you probably are aware of what that is. If you're not, I'm not going to explain it right now. But let's just say that if that comes out, you know, it's probably game over for the whole DS based on what was on the contents of certain laptops. So then we have January 15th, 2024, and this was another thing that showed up all over the headlines, which had to do with Tucker interviewing Dennis Quaid about the idea that solar activity, a solar EMF, just like I was talking about, like the solar flash, could actually destroy our electronics, could wipe all of us out within a year, 90% of the population. And again, this is a very significant thing because this show is getting millions of views. And so something that, again, was talked about in the Michael Prophecies, having to do with the solar effects of a big storm and what it could do, this is very, very poignant stuff. Around the same time, this picture came out of Dwight Eisenhower, the president, and General Patton. And it's very, very curious how much Patton looks like Donald Trump. And so as silly as all this seems to be for some people who are skeptics and they just can't ever get their heads around it, it's very interesting, as I said in other videos, that Patton died and then Trump was born very soon afterwards. They have the same face. It totally kind of fits in with the overall Dr. Ian Stevenson research that if you're the past life of somebody who comes back, you're going to have a face match. And even Dr. Jim Tucker did that research at University of Virginia, brought it forward, and showed the same thing with forensic police face matching software. And so in the books, I talk about some channeled Archangel Michael information that said that Hitler was the reincarnation of Pontius Pilate, the man who crucified Jesus. And therefore, it's very interesting that General Patton was the main general standing off against the embodiment of the devil in modern forms as not Pontius Pilate who killed Jesus, but now Hitler who's killing the Jews, which is totally reprehensible. And I am not a Holocaust denier at all. It absolutely happened. And so that kind of evil was the same force that wanted to crucify Christ. It's actually the same being. So now you have Patton standing off against it, and apparently there's a reincarnation here. So they've been going after him and going after him and going after him for so much. Can I prove that he's the same guy as General Patton? No. But the face is pretty darn astonishing. The birthdays line up. A lot of other character similarities line up. And then this came out on January 22nd, 2024, an image born in desperation. I'm sure you saw this before. And there's $47 in there with this image of a bullet hole to the left. But the one that people weren't catching, I want you to pay close attention now, that the $20 bill and one of the $10 bills are upside down. But then you got a 10, a 5, and 2 ones that are right side up. So add 10 and 5, that's 15. Add the 2 ones, that's 17. That's the number Q. So this is not just a threat against a particular individual, maybe symbolized by 47, but this is also symbolic of a threat against the alliance itself, which uses the number 17. So then we had a whole series of dreams that I began having after the first week of February, and collectively I have to call all of them the demon house dreams. I've been having dream after dream after dream after dream about a house that is possessed by some type of evil, and that we're having to slowly go through and identify where it is and remove it. And it has these amazing components of healing, where as we get rid of these things, there is an actual change, a positive change that happens. And so there's been a whole sequence of very intense dreams that I had. The first one was that I was inside some kind of baseball box seat thing in front of a Little League baseball thing. So I'm up in the expensive seats, but I'm trapped in there because there's a huge panther with green eyes that's blocking the door, and he won't let me go out. So I actually went outside. I said, I will not be intimidated, and I actually shoved this 9-foot panther back and scared him off, and it actually worked, which I would have never done in real life. But that was a very, very interesting dream. And then it was followed by a very, very disturbing demon house dream where all these people were inside the demon house, and they're all influenced by it. And it's having this very interesting effect on them where they're drinking alcohol, they're partying, they're kind of distracted, they're not really aware of what's going on in their lives. And then at some point, there was this understanding within certain people in the group that all of these people were being controlled by something evil. And it turned out that I ended up seeing a convoy, a military convoy, of what looked like in the dream tanks, but I think they might represent all the farmers and all their equipment and all the protests that are going on in Europe and elsewhere, where there's these massive vehicle convoys. I was seeing a vehicle convoy inside something that looked like the den of the dragon from Lord of the Rings, this big, huge, evil cave that just had this tiny little bridge made out of stone going up, and there's this whole convoy going up there, and the convoy is rolling right into the center, the headquarters of this evil. And there was a guy standing next to me, and he was pointing out certain tanks. He said, oh yeah, those are from Norway. And so Norway is one of the countries that's involved in these protests. So I don't really know if it means any physical military activity or not. But what was very interesting was that this was like, the Alliance kept sending comms that I'll break down in a future video if I have the chance. But I have to have enough time. I got to do it in segments. But they sent some comms in February where they began responding to these demon house dreams I was having almost on a morning by morning basis, very specifically. And I'll walk you through that in our next live stream, whenever that turns out to be. But right after, like within an hour or 2 hours of when I had this dream on February 12th about the convoy rolling in, they posted this, and it says, "You'll find out." And it was this image of these rockets rolling along. So that's pretty shocking. It happened on the same morning. As you can see, the time isn't really specified here. Yeah, it is 8:48. So I'd had the dream around 7:30. I wrote it all down. Bang. This post comes out, and in my dream there was a convoy of vehicles, and this is a convoy of vehicles. And it says, "You'll find out." It's like, whoa, are they making a threat? I don't know. Again, I'm not directly involved in this. But just to show you the kind of awakening that's going on here, this is somebody, David Sutcliffe, who wrote, remember when everybody knew pro wrestling was fake? They finally admitted it. The fans didn't care, and they continued to watch anyway. We're almost there now with politics and the media. And as an extra bonus, he posted it at 11:11 a.m., mate, which I thought was pretty interesting, giving the 11:11 is that numerical code and synchronicity that was happening so much before August 11th, because the Grand Cross conjunction of August 11, 1999 was going to happen exactly at 11:11 a.m. And so he posted this at 11:11 a.m. Now, another really interesting thing was that on February 13th, maybe it's the Alliance, or maybe they're trying to make you scared of UFOs. I'm not really sure. But there was a mainstream media post about a traditional angelic flying saucer shooting down one of our nuclear missiles. And again, they're not going to allow us to have a big nuclear war, any nuclear war. So here it is, again, back to the slide. And it says here, UFO reportedly caught on video shooting down nuclear warhead during test launch. Government would have made the footage disappear. So notice there is a stylized flying saucer image in there. And then when you look at the next one, it says, you can very clearly see now they're describing from this Daily Mail image of exactly what we have. 2 U.S. Air Force officers see a UFO appear after warhead detaches from the missile. Disc-shaped craft circles the warhead. UFO appears to fire 4 beams at the warhead. Atlas rocket flying 8,000 miles per hour over the Pacific Ocean and launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Then once again, they show the flying saucer image here, and this is, so what they're saying is they actually have video of this, apparently from different angles. And it's very convincing. And do they want you to be scared by that? Do they want you to think, oh my gosh, ETs are a threat? No. They're not going to let us do any big nuclear war. They've been telling us this through multiple insiders for a very long time. I've done movies about it. I never expect any type of nuclear annihilation. We are being led through a non-catastrophic event. So then the thing that really, really has raised my hackles and gotten me so worried that I felt like I'm going to drop everything and do a video where it really happened was on February 15th, where Dan once again had this epic prophecy by posting an old video from America Online. And this is February 15th, 2024, 10:36 p.m. in this case. And what we see in the video is the AOL connection, the old-fashioned dial-up, where you hear that high-pitched squeak of the telephone modem. It's doing all that kind of stuff, right? And you're like, darn, man, is it going to connect or not? And in this case, it never does. What's interesting about it is that the connection never takes place. You don't get any online activity. And when you look at how long the video is and then what posts it corresponds to, that's all stuff I want to build out later, because the comms are telling us they're getting ready to do something right now. And so you do need to be prepared. And again, what was so amazing about this was that he warned about this going back to the previous thing on February 15th. And then very, very soon after that, within just a couple of days, okay, within just a couple of days, we actually had the real phones go down for, 8 hours. I mean, my buddy in Missouri, he was down for 8 hours. So that was like, yet again, another prophecy where they said something in advance and then it just comes true. And I'm thinking to myself, this was widely taken. Let me go back to the slide here and do that one again, because that's cool. Okay. So this was widely taken to predict a nationwide internet outage, and then it actually did happen. So at the same time, I've seen things like this coming out when you've served dutifully in the great meme wars of the 20s, and he's being, flagged as the meme war general. There's ridiculous stuff like this that you see out there. There's photographs like this that get text put over them, And now we're seeing news like this coming out. Wow, okay, even the New York Times, and Larry is saying, turn off the lights, the party's over. We've got some very astonishing stuff that Cat Williams just came out with that probably nobody wants you to hear on the inside. They're like, oh, how do we stuff this down? Okay, let's make a racist scandal. Let's make sure that they're racist. But again, notice that even Joe Rogan has now got this deer antlers, symbolizing, an animal of great power and strength and authority. And then in the middle of it is the traditional flying saucer. So this information is going viral. I mean, people are figuring it out. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is what it actually says in the Quran about this first wave of ascension. Oh, David, that's not Christian. Well, wait a minute. I'm not going to rule out anything. And if there's data that I can find from a really fascinating source like this, and it sheds light on what's going to happen, I want to hear it. So what I'm about to read you is a modern translation of the Islamic Bible, various passages of the Islamic Bible. I'll show you which ones. It's from a modern day translation that kind of gives you, more user-friendly wording, more user-friendly language, but the Quran was written 800 years later, and it has some really incredible stuff that seems to be a prophecy of the same thing Michael is talking about in the first wave. So before I do any of Michael's prophecies in some later videos, I wanted to get this thing in from the Quran first because it's so amazing what it says. So check this out. You're not going to believe it if you haven't seen this before. These are, again, the words of Muhammad. Apparently, Archangel Gabriel, or Angel Gabriel, spoke through Muhammad and channeled the Quran. And it very likely was an ET contact, again, involving a disc. And these contacts keep getting turned into religions. That's what they don't want.
But again, check out what the Quran tells us is about to happen to us. I believe this is going to happen by, as Michael says, the middle of next year, 2025. And it's the result of these arrests taking place, people learning the truth, people opening their hearts, allowing themselves to grieve, to feel the pain, to realize, wow, there's some really dark stuff going on that I wasn't aware of before. It doesn't make me bad that I didn't know about it. I just simply didn't know. So wow, this is so amazing. Look at this. When time suddenly disappears, in the eternal moment of illumination, the brightness of the heavenly orbs will be split open and dissolved into transparent light. Sounds like a solar flash, doesn't it? Yeah. Those who fail to live in constant expectation of this mystic day, regarding this teaching as myth or imagination, will be severely disappointed when the last day actually arrives and they are not spiritually prepared. Meditation on Holy Quran 77, 8, and 15. The brightness of the heavenly orbs will be split open, that's the sun, right, and dissolved in a transparent light. There's a flash. And what does it mean that you'll be disappointed when the day arrives if you're not spiritually prepared? Well, Michael has explained this to a great degree. How much spiritual advancement you've been doing up until now determines what will happen to you when this takes place by or before the middle of next year. And again, you don't have to read the books. It's going to happen either way. I really do believe this, and I'm very, very excited about whatever we're about to see, because we're in the final ignition sequence. I mean, it's happening now. You're not going to be waiting until November at all. I consider that disinformation. I think it's being put out for a reason, and there's some people who, you know, at times they want to talk about it being then, but it's probably not going to be then. There's, to me, a very clear and concise pattern of extreme activity that suggests that all the boxes are being opened right now. Everything is getting ready to be done now. It will be legal. It's not going to be that bad, but you're probably going to lose internet. You're not going to be able to be online, and you might get emergency messaging videos on your phone. So again, the Quran is actually saying if you haven't been prepared for this, then you're going to be disappointed, because some people are going to be glowing with light, some people are going to be levitating, but you might not be ready for that yet. And it's going to take a while to build through the stages to get to that point. But now, after this first wave happens, it will be possible. So I'm just trying to correlate what the Quran says and what Michael said, and it's fascinating. Here's another example. Upon the mysterious day when time ends, all manifest being will tremble at the first thundering blast of divine resonance that will utterly stop the world. Wow. Time is going to come to an end. All manifest being will tremble by a thundering blast. Well, yeah, it's the solar flash once again. Something happens out of the sun. The crop circle messages keep showing us this, and they associate it with the wicker basket formation, which is, again, the downfall of the DS. This momentary terror will disappear as each soul realizes its spiritual body to be perfect, limitless, and holy. Each soul, that's everyone on earth. Meditation on Holy Quran 79, 6, and 13. Every soul will go through this thundering blast of divine resonance. Every soul realizes its spiritual body is perfect, limitless, and holy. That's Michael's message. We're all going to make it. There's not going to be a catastrophic change. Time comes to an end. There's some type of multidimensional, very bizarre consciousness activation that we're getting. And then we realize that we have a perfect, limitless, and holy spiritual body. I mean, this is just really, really wild. Really, really wild. And then it says here, you must come to know with absolute certainty that from above your conscious being, as stars above the earth, there gaze angelic protectors. Upon pages of light in the invisible book of your life, which will become visible on the day of truth. Wow, okay. The invisible book of your life is a metaphor of your karma, your past lives, and that's one of the things. You're going to start to be able to remember these other identities that you've had and see yourself as more of a multidimensional being, apparently. These heavenly beings record all of your actions and reactions on this book of life. Even your most secret motivations they have perceived and transcribed with perfect clarity. Meditation on Holy Quran 82, 10 through 12. And here's another one. This is very amazing. When the day of enlightenment dawns, the soul, expressed as a luminous body, the face of its being suffused with calm joy, awakens into the supernal garden of divine presence. Overwhelmed, to comprehend at last the full significance of its own spiritual commitment. Meditation on Holy Quran 88, 1 through 5. Now, let's just look at this for a second. The soul there's a day of enlightenment, and it's a dawn. And again, they talk about a thundering blast of divine resonance. They talk about the heavenly orbs will be ripped open. And this, again, is a day of enlightenment. And now we have a luminous body, apparently, so we get the light body activation. And you awaken into the supernal garden of divine presence. I don't know what that is, but it sounds awesome. And you're overwhelmed to comprehend at last the full significance of all your spiritual commitments. So all this stuff that you've been doing, trying to be a good person, trying to be nice, service to others, living a clean, good life, all this kind of stuff is very, very important. I gotta end it here in just a minute because I don't want to go past 2.5 hours at the most. And I'm definitely going to honor that. But to recognize the full significance of your commitment, once again suggesting you really only have a year left here. And so what you do in this one last year is extremely critical about what will happen to you once this first wave takes place. And again, you can laugh at me, but they told us that they held off the solar flash in 2012. We have proof of that. It happened on Proxima Centauri. It didn't happen here. Archangel Michael told us through Edgar Casey that the Earth's inner core was going to shift beginning in 2001. It did. It stopped in 2013. So the pole shift happened without a disaster, not the Book of Revelations kind of stuff. And if this source is predicting the future so accurately so many times, why would it be wrong about this? So I don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, it could be any time between now and the middle of next year. It really has to do with when the public becomes widely awake and aware of what's really going on, and they're not hiding from it anymore. So the soul recognizes the significance of its own spiritual commitment expressed as a luminous body. If you haven't been doing the homework over the next year, you're not going to be coming in fully Ascension compatible. You're not going to come in with a light body. You're not going to come in levitating. I mean, maybe nobody will. It might take a little while to figure this out, but apparently not. Some of us are going to have it almost immediately, apparently. It's literally like a superhero cosmic activation driven by the physics of our solar system and the use of the photon, the sacred geometry. That's why I did this sacred science course, 11 hours to explain at thedisclosure.com. The keyword again is jubilation, Jubilation. You can dig into 11 hours of me talking about this stuff on video with a top insider, Stavati Aerospace CEO, Chris Beskar. We talk together on this like a peer review, and he shares lots of insider stuff that you're not going to hear anywhere else. It's very pertinent to what's going on. I explain why this is going to happen. I explain the science behind why this is going to happen, why I believe that we will maintain our physical bodies, because the energy of reality itself is going to change. So if you haven't done the work, if you haven't fulfilled your spiritual commitment, you might be disappointed. And then here's another one from the Quran. On that timeless and transcendent day, human beings will experience resurrection in bodies composed of light. Wow, I mean, this is happening. This is what Michael is telling us. Resurrection in bodies of light, and will be shown clearly all the thoughts and actions of their lifetimes. Meditation on Holy Quran 99.4. I mean, that's unambiguous. Human beings will experience resurrection in bodies of light. And you will see all of your lifetimes, thoughts and actions of their lifetimes. Yeah, multi-incarnational consciousness. Michael is saying it, and then I found out it's in the Quran. This blew me away to see this stuff in the Quran. I could not believe it when I first found this. I was so excited. So here's another one on the day of clarification. How few human beings understand the intensity and magnitude. I just heard thunder outside. I don't know if you could hear that. The noise cancellation probably caught it. But how few human beings understand the intensity and magnitude of the swiftly approaching day of clarification. Those who do not really comprehend the nature of the last day are impatient and would like to speed its arrival, whereas those who know the immense power of the living truth stand in trembling awe before the dawning of this infinite day. Meditation on Holy Quran, chapter 42, verse 7. And then last but not least, if each spiritual nation practices faithfully the path revealed through its own holy prophets, then all humanity will return together to the source of love. Meditation on Holy Quran, 551. So to me, this is very exciting because, again, if you go back to the original text and not create a bunch of religious distortion, it says it doesn't matter what you practice. If each nation practices its own sacred teachings, then all of us will return together to the source of love. I mean, wow, are you getting it? This is just crazy. So let's go look at some more comments here, if I dare. A troll is rude about it. It would be beautiful for it to all go down like that, David. That's not how life works. Well, you know, I'm just here to teach what I have been seeing as the truth. If you don't believe it, that's okay. You know, we're not angry. Like, if you don't believe the stuff that I'm telling you, if this all just has to be something that you see in like a cloud of theoretical nonsense, yeah, I just don't believe it. That's okay. And the point is that the challenge has been posed. You can take the challenge. You can read the books. I've highlighted all the prophecies in red. You can see them on every page almost. And they're so undeniable that, yeah, it's an indirect method. You're not going to get yet beings showing up in person and telling you this in person, but they are going to show up, and I personally do not want to have to apologize to them when they get here. I'd rather feel good about what I've done. I'd rather feel good about that I've done my best to try to be ready for this. So I'm not saying that you absolutely have to believe this is true, but I'm saying it's a good idea to act as if it could be true, because in the next year, if it takes that long, you still have time to go through your spiritual work and your advancement. You still have time to learn more about yourself, to open up more compassion, more forgiveness, more service to others' behavior. Not, no, you can't guess what's inside by shaking me. I mean, that's why I had to do that at the beginning. It was so funny. Here I have a box, and the box is addressed to fragile, and it says it's made with less material, which is kind of like rising to a higher density, less material. And you can't guess what's inside by shaking me. Well, it's the time of no more secrets. Everybody's going to know what's inside. It's the glass ceiling. You can see what's going on everywhere, and you have this omniscient consciousness. So David for president, David for pope, I don't know. Okay. I mean, that is kind of what the Michael prophecy says is going to happen. I don't really... This is another thing. I mean, like, it's very hard to talk about this stuff, you guys, because Michael says in the books that they're going to run an embassy to communicate with humanity. So by mid-2025, they're saying, hey, look, we're going to show up. We're going to be here in person. We're not going to ever be missing from you again. You know, we're going to be right here out in the open. The saucers show up. Human beings show up. And it turns out if you're an ET soul like me, if you're a wanderer, if you have this strange, you know, connection to ETs and UFOs and you feel out of place and you don't understand why everybody's so hurtful and evil and deceptive and you keep getting advantage taken of you, people steal your money, people lie to you, and you don't understand why people aren't like you and why they're not more loving and more peaceful, you're probably an angelic soul. If you feel out of place here, if you feel more advanced than everybody else, more intelligent than everybody else, guess what? I've learned in the course of this Michael Prophecies work that we have DNA parents from the angelic kingdom, and you're going to meet them in person. Imagine that your body is made partly of genetic material that they gave you, and that genetic material has Ascension spring-loaded angelic DNA in it that's made for you for your Ascension process. Oh, look at that. I got 2 hours, 22 minutes, 2:22, right as I looked at the clock. That's wonderful. So this is a very, very fascinating topic, and it's, again, something that I want to close out with meditation. Let's read a few more comments here. You are Archangel Michael. No, that's, I mean, maybe in the future, but not right now. There's nowhere I can be without them letting me know they are there. LOL. Stone Hobbit said that. Yes, I agree. Mermeizing mentoring. I believe it was because I was told one of God's end time servants when I was about 29, I have a gift of prophecy, also like you, but not to the same extent of being a psychic. David, thanks for the video. I pray we all find our way home. Love from Australia, mate. How does one buy the Michael Prophecies without using a credit card? I do not have a credit card. I do think we have a backup PayPal option available. Please talk about Tucker Carlson and Q. Well, I believe Tucker Carlson is putting out shows on Twitter or X, that really nail down everything we've been talking about in Michael Prophecies, almost beat for beat, episode for episode. I'm very proud of what he's doing. I wish I could have anywhere near his level of productivity. He's cranking out new episodes every day. It's phenomenal. And so, you know, I really like what's going on, and I see Joe Rogan doing this, and I see Elon Musk doing this, and I see Trump doing this, and I see lots of people doing this. So I think everybody's pretty aware of the Michael prophecies now, and they want it to happen. And I've tried to stay the hell out of the way. I don't want to say that this was me. I didn't write this stuff. It was remote viewed, but with so much prophecy, it's just very, very amazing. So now let's just read a few more comments here. WWG1WGA, but man, it sucks coming down for this mission with amnesia. I agree. It's really tough to be here, but you know what? We get through it. So there's a lot of really great messages here. I know it's a lot to take in. I'm sorry if you are having trouble believing that something this outrageous could happen. But without further ado, let's just go into a nice meditation so I can keep it to 2.5 hours. All right? Let me set up some camera shifts here. We'll do that one to that one. All right, so first thing I'd like you to do here is close your eyes, take a nice deep breath. Let yourself relax. And imagine, if you will, this all-encompassing peace on the day of clarification. When the heavenly orbs are ripped open, time comes to a stop. There is the release of transparent light, and all knowledge comes to you in an instant of your past lives. It is a very, very fascinating and interesting thing that we have been told this prophecy, that we've been given this information. As you breathe deeply, imagine yourself coming into alignment with the energy of love, forgiveness, compassion, patience, long-suffering, honor, duty, responsibility, and trust. And know once again how deeply and fully and magically you are loved. As you keep breathing in, imagine this moment of truth, this galactic family reunion. It seems impossible to believe. Some people in the comments can't. But imagine that these humans show up glowing with light, and they're talking to you and looking you in the eye, and you can shake their hand, and they're fully real and fully visible to you. This is the promise of what we have now been told to expect. And this is what seems to be coming in our imminent future. No longer will we wonder about what is truth or what is illusion. No longer will we wonder about whether we're alone in the universe. No longer will we wonder about whether we are loved and whether we can trust in God, as it says in the U.S. slogan on the dollar bill, "In God we trust." We will discover that we have never been left alone. We've never been abandoned. We've had spiritual, wonderful beings here the whole time, and they are adamantly ensuring that we will be safe, that we will be protected, that no harm will come to our planet, there will be no nuclear war, and that a peaceful outcome takes place for all involved. And may I remind you that these beings oversee the soul and karmic destiny of all souls on earth, and they will not leave until everyone, including the members of the darkest and most negative groups, have been fully healed in their own way. Even if that healing involves breaking up into multiple identities and having different incarnations, it will all get done. Everyone goes through an awakening. Everyone goes through a heart-opening experience. Everyone goes through a healing. Everyone goes through a purification. And everyone becomes aware of the infinite knowing that exists outside space and time. This is not something that we have to pine away for forever. We've been given a very direct timeline, so you're not going to hear David Wilcock videos in 2027 talking about this, 2028. They've told us we only have 1 year. So if I were you, yeah, I might want to listen to this and I might want to pay attention. Might want to breathe even deeper and just find the love that's available right now, the point of power in the present. Breathe in that love, feel the radiance of it, feel the warmth and the glow, And imagine that love being sent out to all those in need of prayer and healing throughout the earth, all those who are suffering, all those in war zones, all those in positions of power, so they can make the most effective and peaceful decisions possible. And then send that loving energy back to yourself. Envision yourself wrapped up in this healing and going through the transfiguration that we have been promised in the Bible, in the Quran, the Michael Prophecies, and the Law of One, the Hindu scriptures, the Vedic scriptures, the Zoroastrian scriptures, and so many other works, including those of the Native American tribes. This is something that I do believe is going to happen, and so it is. All right, welcome back. I'm glad that we were here, and I am now going to stop this within 2.5 hours, so thank you for watching. This is David Wilcock, and we will see you the next time.